You know, whenever October rolls around, I can't help but reflect how My Little Pony Friendship is Magic has grown 1 year older, and also by extension how it's been another year since the show has ended its 9-year run. The fact that the premiere date and the finale date are so close like this, it's kind of bittersweet. So I've decided that we should commemorate the occasion by taking a retrospective look at the series, analyzing every last little detail there is to examine. Now, is this a good use of our time? It is if we do it together. And since this is going to be a long video, grab a snack in one hand, grab a drink in another, and free up one of your hands and take my hand, because we're going to go on a journey back to 2010.
Surprise! In a place called Ponyville, anything can happen. Really?
Before the first episode of the first season even aired on the fateful day of October 10th, 2010, particularly eagle-eyed viewers on 4chan were already watching over this franchise with keen interest. While this website prides itself on anonymity, in what seems like fate destined beyond our humanly understanding, a named member going by The Zam posted this on Ko, the comics and cartoons board, a day before the show actually premiered. The fact that the image used was this, which just evokes a very strong sense of nostalgia, coupled with the abbreviation MLP rather than typing out My Little Pony or MLPFIM, really just cements this post as something that should be documented in history books. Like, what a true trendsetter this was. This post was made even more legendary when we take a look at the very first response to it. This is going to have so much, and the response to that being, why would it? The first MLP didn't have much Rule 34. Why would this be any different? Anyways, the following day, the first episode of the show, Friendship is Magic Part 1, aired along with the channel The Hub. With The Zam returning to Ko to leave a link to the first episode on YouTube. Because this post went 6 minutes without a response, The Zam bumped his own thread, which resulted in a response 2 minutes later. This is not sexy. What were they thinking? For the rest of the day, this post had accumulated a lot of responses that really set this franchise apart from anything the world has seen thus far. But we shall get back to this after we go through the first episode ourselves.
My Little Pony Friendship is Magic, where friends come together. Check your local listings.
But before we even get to the first episode, we're gonna have to rewind the clock a bit to what came before the show. No, not that far. Or at least not yet. I think it's worth first starting this retrospective with My Little Pony Adventures, the test pilot. Now, the first thing you may notice is how this short contains no music, so it gives off some uncanny vibes, though it does have ample sound effects. And speaking of uncanny, Rainbow Dash's voice here is quite different from what we hear in the show.
Sorry, practicing moves. Woohoo!
As she is flying around, Pinkie hops in and brings forth Twilight and Umbrella.
Twilight, a bubble and umbrella.
Here we can see that Pinkie also has a different voice.
I mean, I brought you an umbrella.
I'm assuming it's Tara Strong, voice of Twilight Sparkle, playing all three characters here, since they all basically sound just like Twilight. Anyways, Pinkie explains how, because her tail twitched, something is going to fall from the sky, which all culminates in...
Do you really think a tail twitch is a reliable sign for rain? Look out below!
That might be the most underwhelming explosion sound I've ever heard. But speaking of sounds and sound effects, this whole thing seems very Hanna-Barbera-esque. And on that note, seeing things fall around and injure these characters, it's definitely going for a slapstick comedy style, which would be very in tune with Hanna-Barbera cartoons. And it's always cool seeing what things inspired whatever it is we're analyzing to see where it's coming from. Now, there's not too much else to dissect in the short, on its own merits anyway, and the other things there are to analyze here are really only brought forth when compared and contrasted to the main show, so let's leave this here for the time being. Though throughout our journey, let us see what elements of this pilot thing survived into the actual series, and what kind of stuff got left on the cutting room floor. After all, this was basically show creator Lauren Faust's vision of what the show should have been, and it's always cool to see what a creator's original idea looks like before any network meddling takes place. Though I suppose, on the other hand, stuff like this does require some network/investor pandering, since you'd want them to actually pick up or invest in or whatever it is you're pitching. So this may not have actually been as unfiltered as I'm making it out to be, but still, it's the closest thing to that we're gonna get.
Once upon a time, in the magical land of Equestria.
So this is it, the birth of a universe. A universe that will go on to inspire millions of fans and haters alike to pay attention to this franchise for the next 9 years and counting. Let's see if they actually did a good job setting up this brand new world. We start off with some exposition about two sisters, where the older one controlled the sun while the younger one controlled the moon.
To do this, the eldest used her unicorn powers to raise the sun at dawn. The younger brought out the moon to begin the night.
Interestingly, it seems as if the term alicorn hasn't been thought of at this point, because both of these alicorns are called unicorns for some reason. In fact, nowadays, we have the convenient term alicorn to refer to winged unicorns, or I guess horned pegasi if you go that way. But that term wasn't actually canonized until 3 seasons in, though we'll get there when we get there. So the younger one got mad because nobody was there to admire the night and decided to make the nighttime last forever.
But the bitterness in the young one's heart had transformed her into a
Holy crap, that jump scare. And she turned into this evil version of her, Nightmare Night. But she gets trapped in the moon because the older sister blasts her with the elements of harmony.
Using the magic of the elements of harmony, she defeated her younger sister and banished her permanently in the moon.
What is this? We don't know, nor does the show really try to explain what it is yet. And apparently the older sister took control of both the sun and the moon.
The elder sister took on responsibility for both sun and moon.
Well, what's the point of having 2 princesses if one can control both in the first place? If it was to balance out power so no one pony has unmatched power just in case they turn evil, well, it's a great thing this older sister never abused her newfound power then, isn't it? It turns out that this pony, Twilight Sparkle, was reading this book out on this patch of grass. After showing us this goofy angle, we are introduced to the legendary theme song that is iconic at this point.
My little pony.
A theme song that we shall revisit later. After the theme song ends, we are left with the horrifying realization that this world has some very empty backgrounds. Then these ponies, who are supposed to be Twilight's friends, invite her over to a party their other friend, Moondancer, is having.
Moondancer is having a little get-together in the West Castle courtyard. You wanna come?
To which Twilight rejects and zips off to go home, with her friend saying,
Does that pony do anything except study?
I think she's more interested in books than friends.
So, if she's that homebound and hates social interaction, why was Twilight reading a book outside, besides to conveniently show the fact that she rejects her friends? Which then leads us to the question of how she has friends in the first place, which is made even more confusing by how she seems to be friends with literally anyone and everyone she runs past. Anyways, Twilight runs home and... does this entire building belong to her? She must be one hell of a rich pony to own all that estate. Are these the benefits one gets from being the princess's prized pupil? If so, how do I become one? Though, I need to ask, is this sand clock real or cosmetic? How do you tell these books apart? Now, don't worry, I'm not gonna dig into every little animation quirk that we run across, but I just want to put that out there. So Twilight refers to this book that talks about how, quote,
The Mare and the Moon, myth from olden pony times. A powerful pony who wanted to rule Equestria, defeated by the elements of harmony and imprisoned in the moon. Legend has it that on the longest day of the 1000th year, the stars will aid in her escape, and she will bring about nighttime eternal.
Huh? What does this mean? There is so much wrong with this one sentence. Let us break this down bit by bit.
Legend has it.
Implies that this is a fictional story, maybe not completely fabricated, but a fantastical twist on a true event. If we are to take the story from the prelude as a historical account, which it is confirmed to be later on, it makes sense that ponies relaying this story might add more fantastical elements to it, to make it like more of a spooky campfire story to tell their kids, I guess. This is backed up by how Spike says,
Mirror in the moon? But that's just an old pony's tale.
I bring this up not as criticism, but as an observation that based on the fact that Twilight is putting trust into this legend that everyone else thinks is fictional, we can add superstitious to what we know about our lead character so far. Man, I sure do hope this isn't completely contradicted in these next upcoming episodes. The next line is
That on the longest day of the 1000th year,
this isn't inherently weird either, or at least on the surface. Since some days in real life actually are longer and shorter than others, the measurement of 24 hours aside, it really depends on what season it is and how far the sun is away from the hemisphere and all that. Now, sure, that is the case for real life, but in this universe, like we established 3 minutes ago, Princess Celestia controls the rising and setting of the sun, so, which means that she literally controls how long a day gets to be. So, if this is a metaphor for how Celestia is gonna go missing, should this not be the longest night and not the longest day?
the stars will aid in her escape, and she will bring about nighttime eternal.
Okay. Says who? We even found out about this information to catalog it. At the end of the episode, we find out that the legend is true, but it's so specific. Also, why do the stars aid in her escape? Does Nightmare Moon somehow have control over the stars as well? We'll come back to this later. For now, if you were also wondering whether or not this sand clock is functional, it seems that the answer is, it's not just functional, it's sentient, since it disappears and reappears. This ladder also seems to be sentient, since it falls down, yet it's still up. Not to mention, isn't it amazing how the sand clock is actually, like, dripping now? But on that topic, why? It's moving at a fast rate, therefore it should have been completely finished while Twilight was out reading. Though, now that I think about it, maybe giant sand clocks are how ponies tell time instead of using clocks? That would be stupid, since that means that you'd have to stay up until 12 a.m. to flip it just in time to indicate a new day, but I won't completely discard the idea of ponies using sand clocks to tell time. Then we get this visual gag of Twilight straightening her tail for Spike to bounce off of.
Okie dokie.
I'm not sure if this is ever done again during the show's run. In fact, rewatching this first season, I noticed quite a few small things like this that make it distinctly different from the rest of the show, which shall definitely be noted as we go on. Anyways, Twilight gets Spike to write a note to the princess in order to warn her about the dangers of Nightmare Moon for this gag to go on.
My continuing studies of pony magic have led me to discover that we are on the precipice of disaster.
Hold on. Press it.
Threshold. Brink? That something really bad is about to happen.
We'll come back to this in a second. For now, I want to bring up this appearance of Nightmare Moon in the sand clock. I'm not quite sure what the percentage of people who ever watched this episode and noticed this upon their first watch is, because it's not necessarily supposed to be hidden, but it has just the right amount of subtlety, since it's not like they point it out or anything. For that, I'd say that this is some excellent foreshadowing. Though, it doesn't really explain whether this is just Twilight's imagination, or if Nightmare Moon is manifesting herself somehow, or what, but whatever. It's cool enough, even if it's nightmare fuel. Anywho, Spike continues composing Twilight's letter.
The mythical mare in the moon is in fact Nightmare Moon. Something must be done to make sure this terrible prophecy does not come true.
How does Spike know how to spell big words like mythical and prophecy, but not brink? And you're trying to tell me that in all of these years where Spike has been Twilight's pet/son/brother/slave thing, she's never had him write any of these words before? This is made even more ridiculous when this proceeds to happen.
It's imperative that the princess is told right away.
Why does he try spelling imperative, especially in the middle of the page? Especially since he's already signed the letter.
Your faithful student, Twilight Sparkle.
Twilight Sparkle. Got it.
Great. Send it.
This would be completely unforgivable if not for the fact of how much I love Twilight's reaction here. This is such an expressive look, and I don't think they ever reuse it, which is interesting. Anyways, the princess quickly writes back saying that Twilight needs to touch grass instead of studying all the time, and that she needs to check up on the preparation of the summer sun celebration, and more importantly, to make some friends. Either that or she wrote two separate letters. It's kind of hard to tell. The potential first letter starts off with,
My dearest, most faithful student, Twilight.
Then there's a commercial break, which when it ends, it's resumed with,
My dear Twilight, there is more to a young pony's life than studying.
Are these two different letters sent in succession, or did the princess literally write Dear Twilight Sparkle twice in the same letter? Also, how convenient is it that Spike is reading this letter detailing how Twilight has a task to complete in Ponyville, as they are already approaching Ponyville? Unless this is like his second time reading the letter for some reason. None of this would be an issue if the entire letter was inserted as a voiceover narration instead of dialogue. Especially if it was played over some cool establishing shots of them flying over to Ponyville. Though, speaking of which, why are the guards running mid-air? Why not just only use your wings? Is there an advantage of doing this with your legs? Anyways, as they land in Ponyville, this happens.
Maybe the ponies in Ponyville have interesting things to talk about.
Hello?
I remember this interaction specifically cracking me up when I first saw it as a child, so let me know what you thought of this great first impression as well. Anyways, Twilight's first thing to check up for the celebration is the banquet preparations, spearheaded by Applejack and the Apple family.
Number 1, banquet preparations, Sweet Apple Acres. Yeah!
Hey, wait a second, where did the pencil and paper go?
My name is Twilight Sparkle. Well, how'd it do, Miss Twilight?
Applejack then introduces her family members.
This here's apple fritter, apple bumpkin, red gallop, red delicious, golden delicious, caramel apple, apple strudel, apple tart, baked apples, apple brioche, apple cinnamon crisp, big Macintosh, apple bloom, and Granny Smith.
Wow, how family-oriented. She only rudely left out apple cider, apple brown Betty, apple cobbler, apple crumple, apple dumpling, apple flora, sweet tooth, apple mint, apple munchies, apple fritter, apple honey, apple leaves, apple split, apple squash, apple strudely, apple top, apple core, uncle and aunt orange, Brayburn, bushel, hayseed, crimson gala, perfect pie, red delicious, pink lady, red June, Wensley, ginger gold, Florina tart, fiddlesticks, gala applebee, golden delicious, Pacific rose, maple apple, Jonah gold. Now, unfortunately for the both of us, you missed, but more importantly, thank you. You almost put me out of my misery, and there were like 40 or more of these points that... Yeah, to help you get put out of your misery or whatever you just said. That was totally why I did what I just did. It totally wasn't because I genuinely hate you and want to see you suffer and die or anything. No, that's crazy talk. That couldn't be it. Well, the Apple family wants to have Twilight sample their food, which she declines, but eventually caves in from being guilt-tripped by Apple Bloom, which results in this fat Twilight. I mean, this is kind of disturbing since in any other cartoon, she would look like this right after the gag, but then would return to normal in the next shot, like this, for example.
My good man, how you doing? You're gonna pay, one way or another.
But the fact that we get multiple angles of her like this is just a little strange. But before we get to praise the beauty that is this, they look for a Pegasus named Rainbow Dash, who's been tasked to clear the clouds, who conveniently comes crashing into Twilight. In hindsight, this scene is very odd. For one, the fact that Rainbow Dash just so happens to crash into Twilight exactly at the moment when they're talking about her. I mean, obviously, this is just cartoon logic, and I'm not criticizing that at all, but it doesn't stop it from feeling a little disjointed. Especially when there's literally nobody else in the background. This place is a ghost town. That and how this isn't really Rainbow Dash yet. Just listen to her voice.
Excuse me? Let me help you.
Like the raspiness is there, but the gusto behind her unrelenting pride seeping through her delivery isn't. This is probably just a result of them not having a super clear idea on her personality yet, mixed with either unconfidence or just uncertainty or just getting used to on Ashley Ball's part. Not saying that's a bad thing at all. I mean, just listen to how I presented myself in my first couple videos.
Applejack differs from other ponies from the series thanks to her signature hat. However, almost every toy version of
My point is, nobody has everything figured out at the beginning. I'm just bringing this up to, once again, make note of why these early episodes feel tonally different from the rest of the show. Still, the way she acts, as in being cocky, flying at fast speeds, laughing at others' misfortunes, and sporting a play first, work later attitude, are all things that went unchanged later in the show, so maybe they actually did have her figured out more than her voice was letting on, but I guess that's another point as to why this scene is so jarring. The fact that we're shown so many aspects of her character in such a short amount of time rather than letting her character naturally unfold in front of her eyes as we spend more time with her. Though, above everything else, I'm glad that they brought up her desire to impress/join the Wonderbolts in this episode.
They're gonna perform at the celebration tomorrow, and I'm gonna show them my stuff.
I'll elaborate more on this in a bit. So after Rainbow Dash shows that she can clear the skies in 10 seconds flat,
What'd I say? 10 seconds flat.
which became somewhat of a quotable meme in the fandom. Get used to that because we're going to be seeing a lot more of that soon. Spike and Twilight visit the town hall to check up on Rarity, who is in charge of decorations. And in this scene, we witness the origin of pretty much the only long-term crush plot point.
No. Oh, goodness, no.
How are my spines? Are they straight?
Now, I'm not gonna get into the whole concept of the ethics of a baby dragon crushing on an adult yet, since there will be plenty of time to reference back to that through this retrospective, trust me. But for now, I want to point out how gross Rarity's horn looks here. The fact that it doesn't connect properly, it just looks really gross, and I'm glad they eventually fixed it. This is another thing we can add to the list of early show weirdness. That and this weird angle. She looks like an egg here. Still, I think Tabitha St. Germain had Rarity's voice and tone pretty figured out.
You? Oh, my stars, darling! Whatever happened to your coiffure?
Oh, you mean my mane?
Not much change from this Rarity to later seasons Rarity.
I'm just here to check on the decorations and then I'll be out of your hair.
Out of my hair? What about your hair?
Interesting how they used the word hair instead of mane, right after just using the word mane. Perhaps horse vernacular wasn't really thought of this early on, but whatever the case is, Rarity takes Twilight to her boutique to fix her mane up, where she also makes her try on all sorts of wacky outfits for no apparent reason. The stupidest part is how Rarity says,
You would telling me where you're from.
Which is a very basic question. You're telling me that this question wasn't brought up on their walk from the town hall to the boutique?
Canterlot! Oh, I am so envious. The glamour, the sophistication. I have always dreamed of living there.
Well, from their interaction, we learn that Rarity is a posh individual who views herself as regal, as she is impressed by the fact that Twilight is from Canterlot.
Let me get you some rubies! Quick, before she decides to dye my coat a new color.
Though, because we are at peak antisocial Twilight, she leaves to go check up on the final team on the preparation list. The music. Wow, is this appearance of this Blue Jay a more de Twi reference? There's nothing really too much to note here. We see that Fluttershy is in fact shy, or at least until she sees a baby dragon, and that she has a way with animals. Though, isn't it quite a miracle how despite there being a lot of daylight burnt between the impromptu eating of all this and making an impulsive detour from the town hall to go to Rarity's boutique, Fluttershy was still out here working on the music stuff? Twilight gets followed to her new home by Fluttershy, who converses with Spike talking about his entire life up until this point.
And that's the story of my whole entire life. Well, up until today. Do you want to hear about today?
Oh, yes, please.
This is stupid since the summer sun celebration is about to start soon, and from the looks of it, your birds weren't prepared for honoring the princess yet.
I mean, no offense, but your rhythm is just a teeny tiny bit off. Now, follow me, please. A 1, a 2, a 1, 2, 3.
Hello!
Yet you still have time for all of this? Well, when Twilight decides it's finally time to recharge her social battery, it turns out that the entire town snuck into Twilight's house to throw her a welcome party.
Now, where's the light?
Since the pink pony from earlier, Pinkie Pie, didn't want a newcomer to feel alone in a new village.
You see, I saw you when you first got here, remember? You were all hello, and I was all, remember? You see, I never saw you before, and if I never saw you before, that meant you're new. Because I know every pony, and I mean every pony in Ponyville. And
Does this mean that the reason there weren't any background ponies anywhere earlier was because they were all secretly hiding in Twilight's house for the entire day until she decided to come in? If so, how long have these snacks and refreshments been sitting out here? Well, we've got more important things to talk about here, such as this random background pony whose eyes look weird for this one shot.
That's odd. Pony eyes aren't supposed to do that.
That's right, Bad News Crow. Heading back to our favorite little frog site, we can see what the initial reaction to this little gag was. Go to 1718 into the first episode and look at the ponies in the background. When you see it. Just cap it, Forrest, dude. When you see it. People didn't seem to get it, even with the screenshot provided. Not seeing it, bro. Licking her butt? Is that it? But this all changed when somebody said, Derp Eyes. And thus they coined the name Derpy Hooves, and she's become a fan favorite character ever since. It only took them 15 days to find it, but it was all worth it. Now, if you're wondering why this pony had crossed eyes in particular, a layout artist from the show revealed the reason on the frog/clover site. Apparently, the scene was originally framed so that you couldn't see her face. A revision was called on it, and there she was. Looks like she was a complete inside joke for whoever set up or animated that scene. She almost didn't exist. And like I said about the initial post by the Zam, a lot of this early show community building really seemed like destined fate in retrospect. Speaking of background ponies, in this party are Twilight's old Canterlot friends that we saw from the beginning of the episode. I have to wonder whether they put these specific characters here to reuse. In other words, were these specific ponies originally supposed to be Twilight's friends, or did they design all sorts of these background ponies and only during the storyboarding/animating phase did they pick these random unicorns to be Twilight's friends? Judging by the fact that there's not even a passing mention of these being Twilight's old friends at the party, I guess we can presume it's the latter reason. Regardless of what the reasoning is, man, is it awkward for them to all be here at a party celebrating Twilight's honor when she specifically ditched a party in one of their friends' honor just earlier in the day.
Yeah, you must not have any friends. And if you don't have any friends, then you must...
Are you alright, Sugar Cube?
Hot sauce.
Anyways, who pours something in their drink without checking what it is first? Isn't this an irresponsible lesson for children? You do realize the fact that she suffers after doing so means that the lesson is to not do that, right? Well, in your face! Anyways, Twilight then goes to bed because she hates social interaction, and this is kind of the best moment in the episode. Not only because of the implication of Spike getting drunk, but also in terms of getting to know more about what Twilight's character is like. Whereas most of this episode so far was composed of things happening to Twilight, this scene isolates Twilight, which gives some room for self-reflection, and therefore us, the audience, seeing how she's processing all this information. She gives us some key points of her personality here from the way she reacts to things.
Here I thought I'd have time to learn more about the elements of harmony, but silly me. All this ridiculous friend-making has kept me from it.
From this, we can gather that she's antisocial and would rather study, and possibly even a misanthrope. Also that she has really excellent roasting abilities.
You really should lighten up, Twilight. It's a party.
Now, with the Summer Sun celebration finally starting, the residents of Ponyville gather in the town hall with the mayor introducing the princess, Princess Celestia. And among this crowd, there's this background gig of Lyra Heartstrings jumping all excitedly. While Lyra is seen jumping excitedly like this in multiple episodes, this background gig doesn't really seem like it garnered the same amount of attention or interest or meme status like Derpy did. Strange how that works. Anyways, while the mayor is going off about...
In just a few moments, our town will witness the magic of the sunrise and celebrate this, the longest day of the year.
Twilight sees the stars finally aiding in Nightmare Moon's escape, and also Princess Celestia appears to be gone, with Nightmare Moon magically appearing in her place from the mist, scaring the gathering, including these three ponies that should not be together yet, since they meet for the first time in a later episode. This makes it obvious that this trio wasn't just an idea they came up with on a whim in the episode where they actually are introduced as a group. This placement is definitely deliberate, but in the same vein, I'm assuming that once again, the episode where they're introduced in wasn't made on a whim either, so explain! Also, I'm really not trying to criticize every little thing that's going on, but Nightmare Moon is supposed to be addressing this entire room, so why is she talking at such a moderate volume?
It's been so long since I've seen your precious little sun-loving faces.
And why is Applejack smiling here? Is this an animation error? Regardless, Nightmare Moon announces her plans to make the nighttime last forever to a group of clones. Throughout this retrospective, I won't usually rant too much about cloned background ponies, unless if we run into a particularly egregious case, since it has been memed and made fun of to death over the years. But I thought I'd mention it here, since it is the first occurrence of this in the show at such a big scale. That, and it's extra odd in this episode, since like we went through in excruciating detail, there were at least a dozen apple ponies you could have dispersed throughout here. Maybe the logic was that the screen would have looked too much like a vomit of a mismatch of colors if they had too many different ponies in one shot, but still, that would have prevented this paradox from happening. Plus, it would have made the world feel a bit more lived in. Not to mention how a large group of people could actually easily look like a vomit of a mishmash of colors anyway.
The night will last forever.
Well, there's a lot to analyze here, and we've still got to look at the initial reactions to this episode, but let us get through part 2 first, because a lot of what I want to say to this episode applies to the 2-part premiere as a whole. So yeah. The interesting thing about this episode is how, starting with this one and going forward, every episode aired on Fridays with the exception of part 1 of this episode, which was actually premiered 5 days before it was supposed to in order to coincide with the debut of the hub. The channel that'll go on to be the home of the show for years to come. And I bring all this up because this fell on a Sunday rather than the usual episode premiere Fridays. And usually whenever I rewatch these 2-parters, I just skip the previously ons, since I'm binging them and I literally just watched the previous episode. But obviously, I get why these were put here, especially because there was a 12-day wait period between part 1 and part 2. Well, obviously, the first part of the episode had reruns before part 2 came out, but you get what I mean. All that to say, it tempted me to just only barely mention the fact that this episode starts with the previously on and just completely right away move along to the actual plot of part 2. But I actually paid attention this time and came to the conclusion that this previously on is stupid. I mean, let's watch it right now and you tell me what this is even trying to convey.
Elements of harmony. See Mare and the Moon? But that's just an old pony's tale. She will bring about nighttime eternal. It's imperative that the princess is told right away. I knew she would want to take immediate action.
My dear Twilight, there is more to a young pony's life than studying. Make some friends!
All the ponies in this town are crazy! I hope the princess was right. She's gone! Oh no! Nightmare Moon!
That barely tells us anything. Or maybe it does, it's just really stilted and not paced well. It would have been so much more effective if we just had Twilight narrating over it, being all, so earlier today, I blah blah blah, met crazy ponies, now we're in this mess. Oh, I hope the princess is alright. Dramatic music. I think if they did something like that, it would have been much more coherent. Anyways, after the theme song, we get a direct continuation of where we left off.
Seize her! Only she knows where the princess is!
So, royal guards try going after Nightmare Moon, but ends up failing miserably, since she escapes. This is stupid. Were these guards called here from Canterlot in the 0.02 seconds between part 1 and part 2, or were they here this whole time, despite not being present in part 1? And if they were, why weren't they doing their jobs and ensuring that Princess Celestia wasn't getting captured? What are they even getting paid for at this point? Twilight runs back home with Spike falling asleep.
You've been up all night, Spike. You are a baby dragon after all.
Which is a very convenient way of practically writing him out of the episode. All while being followed by the rest of the main 6, who come to the conclusion that she's the only pony who knows what's going on. Rainbow Dash even asks,
And how did you know about Nightmare Moon, huh? Are you a spy?
when she was the one secretly following Twilight back home in the first place.
Where's she going?
Also, going forward, take a note of every time Applejack bites Rainbow Dash's tail. We'll tally it up and take a shot for every single time it happens. Twilight explains to her stalkers that she needs information about the elements of harmony, since that's what stopped Nightmare Moon before. And while she is struggling to find anything about it, this happens.
A reference guide. How did you find that? It was under E.
Oh, I'm sorry, Twilight. I thought you were an expert on looking up things under E in particular.
Elements, E. Aha. Elements of harmony.
My bad for actually paying attention to your show. Speaking of being punished for actually paying attention to the show, Twilight gets questioned on how she knows this information, when said information seems to be a pretty widely spread tale that's been spread around for ages.
Mirror in the moon? But that's just an old pony's tale.
Twilight starts pulling this book out of the shelf, and isn't it amazing how all these books are shelved with the spine facing out, yet when she pulls it out, the spine is now facing into the shelf? Awesome. Anyways, this book relays...
There are 6 elements of harmony, but only 5 are known. Kindness, laughter, generosity, honesty, and loyalty.
Wow, cool to see that they just so happen to be standing in the right order. Wait, no they weren't! But on that topic, again with Rarity's weird horn. With the added extra of Fluttershy and every other Pegasus for that matter, having their wings being spanned out as one of their idle poses, instead of them being tucked in all the time like we got accustomed to in later episodes. Well, the book also mentions that the 6th element is residing in the ancient castle of the princesses, deep into the Everfree Forest, which the ponies decide to go to.
The Everfree Forest?
Well, that's dumb. You're telling me that there's this giant, thick encyclopedia all about the elements of harmony, and now you're going to travel all the way to the most dangerous place in existence before reading more of it? While they journey into the Everfree Forest, they all exchange information on why this place is scary.
None of you have been in here before?
Heavens no.
Heavens no! Are you telling me that the concept of heaven exists in this world? Also, now that I'm reflecting on this, I just realized that the terms heavens no and hell no have the exact same meaning, despite logic indicating that they should technically mean the opposite. Anyways, this magical blue mist goes around terrorizing the main 6 by making the ground they're standing on break off. Which results in what may be the actual stupidest part of this episode.
Applejack, what do I do?
Let go.
Are you crazy?
What I'm saying to you is the honest truth. Let go, and you'll be safe.
Temporarily jumping all the way to the end of the episode, Twilight deduces that all of her friends each represent one of the elements of harmony, with this scenario in particular supposedly proving that Applejack is the element of honesty.
Applejack, who reassured me when I was in doubt, represents the spirit of honesty.
This isn't honesty! Why couldn't she just say, let go when Rainbow Dash and Fluttershy will catch you? Or if anything, she was withholding truth, not telling it. Their second challenge comes in the form of this Manticore angrily lashing out at the main 6 because he has a thorn stuck in his paw that Fluttershy takes out. Now, I don't care about the actual scenario here, but interestingly, with this creature, Lauren Faust actually posted concept art of him on DeviantArt with this insight into his inclusion. When I submitted the premise for the pilot, there was a concern that facing a manticore would be too scary for kids, so I designed him kind of dopey to help ease worry. Imagine my surprise when I got the note that he didn't look threatening enough. It's not often that you're happy to get a note, but I was. I like the final one better. Good for her. Also, good to see these other stages in concept art. The next trial they face are these scary trees that have been possessed by Nightmare Moon's evil magic. And the way they get through this is by Pinky singing all about how they need to laugh in times of danger rather than giving into fear.
Laugh to make them disappear. Ha, ha, ha.
That's a message, certainly. If some weird, crazed lunatic breaks into my house, holds me at gunpoint, I think laughter would be like the farthest thing from my mind at that point, but okay, Pinky, if you say so. Though this is quite interesting in terms of how this is the very first musical number in the show, and the way they present it is by having Pinkie Pie sing it. There's a couple things to read between the lines here. Firstly, I feel like they gave Pinkie this extra time to shine mainly because she was barely present in part 1. Secondly, because Pinkie's already been established to be the weird random one, did they perhaps plan Pinkie to be the only one who would burst into random songs? Without jumping too ahead of ourselves, the first few songs are sung by Pinkie solo. This would line up with the mystery of how the instrumental accompaniment somehow just randomly pops out of nowhere to back up Pinkie singing, whereas it would be a bit too fourth wall breaking for somebody else to do that. If this was the case, I guess the writers realized how this actually really limits the range of what kind of musical numbers they can do in the show, and decided to just put a song in whenever they needed. Then again, this is just my guess and I might be like completely off with that, but I did want to point this out just so we can mark the evolution of the show. The next obstacle is the sea monster complaining that his moustache has been torn apart. This leads into a pretty funny joke.
Ow! What did you do that for? Oh!
Like, that's genuinely funny, and I'm so glad they went with that. Of course, Rarity didn't actually slaughter the serpent, but rather cut her tail to be used as his moustache. Twilight voices her concern for this.
Oh, Rarity, your beautiful tail.
But she didn't say anything when Rainbow Dash's entire tail disappeared earlier. On that topic, a lesser show would have probably had Rarity's tail return back to normal in the following scene, but here it seems to be permanently shortened, which I have to give props to, since this way it shows that sacrifices actually mean something. When you sacrifice something of yours to give away as an act of genuine generosity, you shouldn't expect anything in return, nor expect yourself to be physically complete anymore. However, this act of selflessness shows that even if you have to live with a short tail like this for a bit, you still made somebody's day, and that's what matters in the end. As he is now jovial, the serpent lets the main 6 across. But before we also cross the river, let us discuss the sea serpent. While gone unnamed in this episode, due to YouTube auto captions being bad, apparently it picked up a line from a clip of the scene as Stephen Magnet, which has since gone on to be his fan-given name, and also his real name later on in the show. And while staff of the show liked this name, they didn't think Hasbro would approve of naming him after a fandom meme, so they just called him Sea Serpent on his trading card to play it safe. But they still put in a reference to this in his description blurb. Between his lovely luminescent scales, his expertly coiffed mane, his beautiful mustache, and his magnetic personality, there simply isn't anyone in the forest who can compare. Sneaky. Also, if you're wondering what the heck this sea serpent is doing in a random river in the middle of a forest, writer M.A. Larson apparently answered, "River serpent, obviously." I say apparently because the tweet that said this hasn't been archived and I can't find any screenshots of it. But the wiki says so, so sure. Similar to the Manticore, there exist these concepts for Stephen Magnet, and I guess they were trying to play around with colors to see which is the best combo. There's also these earlier designs, and these look disgusting. Maybe it's just because I have an aversion to, like, sea monsters in general, but man, am I glad they ended up with the design they ended up with. Their final trial is this bridge leading to the castle being snapped off, and when Rainbow Dash flies across to the other side to pick it back up, she gets invoked by this group of Pegasi called the Shadow Bolts.
We're the greatest aerial team in the Everfree Forest.
We're like the only one in the Everfree Forest.
But first, we need a captain.
We need you.
Just let me tie this bridge real quick.
No! It's them or us.
And even though the deal sounds tempting to her, she declines because she cares about her friends more. This is a pretty good character-defining moment. Then they finally reach the castle, only to spot 5 elements of harmony instead of 6. And while she's trying to work her magic to make the 6th one appear, the blue mist that's been harassing them takes her and the elements away. Then this blue mist shows itself as Nightmare Moon, and they have this grand battle. Well, if you can teleport, why didn't you just teleport across the bridge from earlier? Or teleport yourself up and down the cliff? Or teleport across the river? Or teleport the Manticore away? Hello? Anyways, Nightmare Moon destroys the elements, and wow, devastated Twilight is very goofy looking. Then, as her friends come over to help, Twilight realizes that her new friends actually all represent the elements.
You think you can destroy the elements of harmony just like that? Well, you're wrong.
We'll come back to this in a bit. Upon realizing this, the 6th element, Element of Magic, appears, and the main 6 all get these jewelry things to cement that fact. Also, Rarity's tail regenerates, which teaches us that sacrifices mean absolutely nothing.
I'll never part with it again.
I take my praise back from earlier. As the sun rises, Princess Celestia finally shows herself by making a grand entrance from this ball of light. Then this happens.
Princess Luna, it has been 1,000 years since I have seen you like this. We were meant to rule together, little sister.
Sister?
Why is Twilight surprised at them being sisters? Did Twilight seriously not put 2 and 2 together from the legend talking about how there's a unicorn princess who controls the sun and moon, and also being closely mentored by a unicorn princess who controls the sun and moon? Even if this was that much of a shock, everybody that I've watched this with, yes, including initial viewers, thought this was obvious information, so who knows? This Reddit comment basically sums up the only possible explanation. The legend says the elder sister took on responsibility for both sun and moon, and that harmony has been maintained in Equestria for generations since. It very carefully doesn't say that it's been the same princess this whole time, and it's perfectly reasonable for Twilight and the audience to assume Princess Celestia is the heir of that long-ago princess. It does, however, raise the question of why Twilight didn't know her beloved mentor is really, really old. But to add on to that, because Twilight is a bookworm and presumably also a bit of a history buff, based on the fact that she likes reading, are we to assume that there's literally no historical records across generations talking about Princess Celestia? Well, obviously the rhetorical reason she says this is to repeat information to cement it as a fact for those of us watching at home. But still!
Hey! You know what this calls for? A party!
We end this episode off with a Pinkie Pie party and Twilight realizing that making friends is important.
Are you not happy that your quest is complete and you can return to your studies in Canterlot?
That's just it. Just when I learn how wonderful it is to have friends, I have to leave them.
To then get tasked by Princess Celestia to stay in Ponyville and send reports about friendship to her.
Twilight Sparkle shall take on a new mission for Equestria. She must continue to study the magic of friendship. She must report to me her findings from her new home in Ponyville.
All ending with this fourth wall break.
Isn't this exciting? Are you excited? Because I'm excited. I've never been so excited. Well, except for the time that went, but I mean, really.
We shall talk about Pinkie's character later. For now, I just want to talk about the thorn in my side that's only been getting deeper and deeper and deeper as the episode was going on. The main question I know a lot of people have about this is whether the main six all meeting and becoming friends and turning out to all represent the elements of harmony was a coincidence or pre-planned destiny. There is an episode down the line that kind of touches upon that, so we'll skip this question for now. The bigger question that's been hurting me right now is, did Nightmare Moon's plan fucking backfire or what? I didn't make it too clear when I was going through the contents of the episode, but the reason that the main six are running into all these trials was because Nightmare Moon, as the Blue Mist, was causing all these things to happen. Which means... Alright, listen. If Nightmare Moon didn't send all these things their way, Twilight literally would have never realized that they all had these elements of harmony powers. Not to mention, what stopped Nightmare Moon from just flying here to destroy the elements first thing after coming out of the moon? That would have been so much more efficient than going to Ponyville Town Hall to laugh in their face. Did she want to win or not? She definitely had a clear goal in mind, and she's had like 1,000 years to build up the anger and actually accomplish this. So I would imagine that she was pretty fired up and motivated to go through with this plan, so what gives? One could argue she literally just didn't know that the elements were located in the castle and was following the main six to see where it was. But that's stupid. First of all, this castle was owned by both sisters, so surely it holds some significance between them. So shouldn't the main six at least walking towards the direction of the castle have been a dead giveaway? Once they got to, I don't know, like the halfway point at most? None of this would have been an issue if they just literally put in one line of her saying, "Thanks for leading me directly to the element, ha ha ha." This episode was just sloppy. I still can't get over how stupid that Applejack part was. In what world does this constitute honesty whatsoever? During the research phase of this video, I frequently referred back to the My Little Pony episode reviews by the mysterious Mr. Enter, mainly because he's gone through the effort of painstakingly making a video on every individual episodes, seasons 1 through 4, making the series a very convenient time capsule-like resource to see what people thought of these episodes closer to their air date, if I needed to bounce my ideas off of somebody else's thoughts to see if I'm on the right track or if I'm just unknowingly making bad observations. That, and even if 90% of the runtime of these reviews are just literally recaps of the episodes with him just saying it's good or it's bad at the end of the video rather than an actual analysis of the contents inside, I also see these as pretty much the de facto reviews of Friendship is Magic on YouTube on an episode by episode case anyway. And the reason I bring this up now rather than saving it for acknowledgements at the end of the video is because I want to play what he had to say about this two-parter.
The second episode feels like a butchered movie, since several vital lines of dialogue are apparently missing, leaving some very awkward implications.
And this made me realize this two-parter should have been a movie. Like, the show should have had a movie premiere, like Jimmy Neutron or whatever. Like, all budgetary and technical logistics and the fact that the show was initially cheaply made to be a toy line advertisement aside, if you wanted to flow this better as a product for consumers, I believe that they should have put like part 1 and part 2 together plus an extra like 5 to 10 minutes just to give everything a little bit more room to breathe. I mean, that would have still not even been an hour long, but I thought the main thing hindering these episodes was the 22-minute cap. You're essentially trying to introduce a new fantasy world along with 7 main characters, and as a result, we really don't give a single one of them a chance to shine, and thus don't really have a reason to be invested in them. Pilot episodes of shows, above just establishing the main cast's personalities, should aim to establish what kind of goals these characters want to accomplish throughout the series long term. That way, we, as the audience, have something to hook ourselves onto and feel more included in the character's journey. If it's just things happening and more things happening, it's easy to feel disconnected. As in, sure, I guess their goal this episode was to restore the elements of harmony, but how am I supposed to latch myself onto that? In this two-parter, we get a glimpse of Rainbow Dash wanting to one day join the Wonderbolts, which is fantastic. Even if I don't have any interest in joining a sports team or whatever the Wonderbolts are supposed to be a pony stand-in for here, fundamentally, this is something I can see myself in, to want to strive to be something greater to get my name out there. Now I can actually say, hey, I'm interested in Rainbow Dash's journey, I should tune into more episodes to see how this all unravels. So why can't we set more of that up? If you have your main characters being attacked by a manticore, then a sea serpent, and evil trees, sure, that's cool, but it's not that deep. If, while venturing through the Everfree Forest, the characters at least briefly discussed what their future plans were, it would have made for a much better first impression, but instead of that, we get...
Whoosh! Me and Fluttershy looped a loop around and wham! Caught you right in the nick of time.
redundant recaps of what we literally just saw. Yay. Not to mention how Twilight literally points out that this is redundant recap.
Yes, Rainbow, I was there.
This is just filler! I specifically brought up the concept of first impressions because while researching what the audience's reaction to these early episodes were, what I saw frequently is that besides maybe Fluttershy and Twilight, they didn't like the main six too much. They thought Rainbow Dash was too egotistical, Rarity was too snobby, Applejack is boring, Pinkie is too annoying. That's not good! But can you blame them for thinking this way? Even when Twilight initially meets the rest of the main six, the only pony who doesn't give a negative first impression is basically Fluttershy, while the rest are incredibly pushy and don't respect basic boundaries. But even then, Fluttershy doesn't really get the hint that Twilight wants to be left alone either.
You simply must get him to bed.
Yes, we'll get right on that. Well, good night.
Now, intuition tells me that all these negatives I'm bringing up is something we can only say in retrospect, and ultimately watching this episode for the first time on your very first watch through will probably captivate you from the characters and concepts it presents. Because, you know, speaking of which, going back to that initial 4chan post that started it all, most of the responses were overwhelmingly positive, saying stuff like, I actually kind of like this. Don't really care about what's going on, but it has decently timed gigs, fluid motion, voice acting that doesn't make me cringe. I'm scared, Ko. Hold me. Thanks for telling everyone, OP. This is actually good. I actually watched this. Holy shit, Ko. What have you done to me? Can't wait for the next episode. Jesus, it's like cocaine. I'm a 24-year-old man. I should hate this. But I watched it all. I love the animation. I love the voices. I hate the story. I can't fucking stop. Damn it. The only thing I bat/eyebrow raise worthy being these comments of all these predictions of descriptions of future art I shall not repeat for the sake of decency. But now that we're done with introductions, let us move on to our first real episode. This episode begins with Spike throwing hard work away. Spike, you do realize that Twilight and Applejack have been busting their flanks off trying to collect these all day, and now you're just carelessly throwing it away like it's nothing, right?
I know, right?
Anyways, Spike receives a letter.
Hear ye, hear ye.
I think it's interesting how this letter starts with hear ye, which I don't recall is a recurring thing in these royal letters, which would make this an early installment oddity, or maybe they do, I don't know, who knows. Also, it's kind of funny how Spike says yada yada in place of the month.
On the 21st day of yada yada yada.
Presumably to avoid, something? I mean, even if months in Equestria were named the same as what we have here in real life, that wouldn't be the craziest thing in existence. Months in real life are named after Roman gods and goddesses, and Equestria has all sorts of mythological creatures running around it anyways, so I don't see what the big deal there would be. Though, I guess then the question would arise on whether these gods and goddesses would have resembled humans or ponies. Anyways, it turns out that this letter is an invitation for Twilight and a +1 to the Grand Galloping Gala.
Princess Celestia of Equestria is pleased to announce the Grand Galloping Gala to be held in the magnificent capital city of Canterlot.
And she receives 2 tickets for it. Then she asks Spike this.
Wow, great! I've never been to the gala. Have you, Spike?
Considering Spike is only a baby and they've been together since Spike's birth, why the f would Twilight ask this question to Spike if not to just rub in the fact that he's never been in his face? Sure, maybe it wasn't planned that Twilight was responsible for Spike literally being hatched 2 episodes in, but that would imply that Spike is just Twilight's child slave with no overt attachment. That's even worse! Anyways, since Spike has no interest in going, Applejack gives her reasoning for why she could really use the spare ticket.
Do you have any idea how much business I could drum up for Sweet Apple Acres? We could replace that saggy old root.
But that's how the farm usually looks like.
And Granny Smith could replace that saggy old hip.
And that's how Granny Smith usually looks?
I'd give my left hind leg to go to that gala.
Oh, well in that case.
Then Rainbow Dash appears and reveals,
What were you busy doing? Spying?
No, I was busy napping. And I just happened to hear that you have an extra ticket.
wow, so the one who accused someone else of being the spy
Are you a spy?
turns out to be the spy herself. You can never trust anyone on this ship. There are imposters among us. Anyways, we get some callbacks to the first episode, with Rainbow Dash explaining how she wants the ticket so she can impress the Wonderbolts there, so she can join them. I like this callback, and we shall revisit this later. For now, Applejack and Rainbow Dash start arguing on who has the better reason to get the ticket, and let's take a shot for every time Applejack bites Rainbow Dash's tail. Also, they start hoof wrestling.
Winner gets the ticket.
And this brings back some repressed childhood memories. Of course, I'm talking about this little seemingly innocuous animation called Applejack and Rainbow Dash have a hoof wrestle, where somebody seems to have reimagined the scene. You know what? Why not revisit a memory I vaulted away a decade ago? Well, that's not hoof wrestling. Hey, why is this tree only half filled with apples? Anyways, while trying to get some lunch, they run into Pinkie Pie, who also wants the ticket so she can go party. And I'm going to assume that this musical number here
Oh, the Grand Galloping Gala is the best place for me.
is where they spent a huge chunk of this episode's animation budget on. Then Rarity also appears where she reveals that
I design ensembles for the gala every year, but I've never had the opportunity to attend.
if Rarity designs ensembles for the gala every fucking year, why isn't she just given a ticket? That seems customary. Are you gonna tell me that she isn't compensated for her work either? Does she just get paid in exposure? Well, Rarity starts having a fantasy sequence where she explains how the gala is the place where she's going to find him, Princess Celestia's nephew, who would end up asking Rarity to marry him. Why is Rarity's horn normal here? Did they just add this last second to fill up space after they came up with this new design? Also, why is Rarity's fantasy in pictures whereas Rainbow Dash and Pinkie's were in full video? The paper texture overlaid on the pictures is kinda cool though. Perhaps this is the lens Rarity sees life through as a whole, implying that she interprets her life as a fairy tale, which is a cool character study, intentional or not. Still, you're probably wondering how the Celestia has a living nephew who isn't also an immortal alicorn. Well, fear not, as Lauren Faust has clarified the lore behind this here. He's the great, and probably even more great, nephew on Celestia's and Luna's mother's side, about 52 times removed, roughly speaking. I would have preferred to call him a duke, but someone in the approval process thought kids wouldn't know what a duke is. Huh? Before we get to ponder upon all that, Fluttershy's main pet, Angel, comes up and swipes away the tickets to present them to Fluttershy, who says she also wants to go to the gala.
I would just like to ask, if it would be alright.
With Rarity absolutely roasting her by saying,
You want to go to the gala?
she says that with so much needless hostility. With the music score in the background emphasizing how preposterously balderdash, Rarity finds this idea of Fluttershy wanting to attend this event that's unanimously known as something everybody wants to go to, which is really funny. Then it turns out that Rainbow Dash and Applejack were following Twilight, with the main 6 bursting into argument on who should get the ticket. And once it dies down, Pinkie says this.
And then I said, oatmeal, are you crazy?
Which might as well be the first one-liner from the show that's ascended into a meme. And at that, this isn't the only Pinkie line that spawned memes from this episode, but we'll get there when we get there. Twilight then tells her friends to f*** off since she can't decide when hungry. Why would Spike leave? He's in the very next scene. At the restaurant, Twilight picks apart this flower to help her decide which friend to take.
Applejack or Rainbow Dash?
Isn't it amazing how there were 7 petals on this thing and after taking off 5, it's completely naked? Is Twilight eating what are supposed to be decorations, or are these supposed to be like breadsticks? On that note, what incentive is there to go to restaurants if flowers and stuff are everywhere? Sure, their food at restaurants get cooked and prepared, but Twilight had no problem eating these flowers raw just now. And on top of that, what is the irony of Spike ordering hay?
I'll have the hay fries. Extra crispy.
Whilst sitting on hay. Can't he just use his fire-breathing ability to fry these himself? Speaking of seating options, let's discuss these mushroom tables. Are these edible? Do mushrooms actually get this big in this universe? Or is this like one of those early 2000s McDonald's chairs, where it's simulated food made bigger to be more fit as a chair? Twilight begins to overthink on who to give the extra ticket to, even playing with the idea of not going herself to give her ticket to another, so 2 of her friends can go instead.
But that would still leave 3 disappointed ponies.
So theoretically, Twilight would specifically give her ticket to Applejack and Fluttershy. Interesting. TV Tropes says the reasoning for this is, when Twilight considers giving up her own ticket so 2 of the others can go, she says that it'll leave 3 of her friends unhappy and imagines a crying Rainbow Dash, Rarity, and Pinkie Pie, implying that Applejack and Fluttershy were the ones she was considering giving the tickets to. It makes a lot of sense when you consider Applejack has the most selfless reason for wanting to go and has first dibs, and Fluttershy was the most polite about asking. I'm not sure if that was actually intentional or if this is reaching, since I'm pretty sure if they arbitrarily picked 2 other ponies in their place, this blurb would have cherry-picked some other ideas to put here. But that's kind of smart if it was the case. Definitely comment whether you think this was intentional or not. Also, get used to me referencing TV tropes a lot in this video. It really was a convenient and useful resource on referencing my thoughts and speculation on these episodes, to see what others have had to say about them over the years. Anyways, the rest of the episode involves her friends trying to suck up to Twilight to get extra consideration for the ticket.
Me? No, of course not.
Well, they end up at Rarity's boutique and...
And you!
I don't know why this is so funny. Perhaps it's because it's such an unnecessary background gig that they went through the effort of animating anyway. Or because they keep his mouth agape afterwards for an extended amount of time, but I don't know. It's funny. Though, while we're here, the way that Rarity presents herself here is so egotistical.
Everyone would be clamoring for our attention. All eyes would be on us. And then everyone would finally know the most beautiful, most talented, most sophisticated pony in all of Equestria is Rarity the Unicorn. And Twilight Sparkle, of course.
That I'm not sure how this was even acceptable. I actually remember how when I initially watched the show for the first time all those years ago, Rarity was my least favorite specifically for that reason. Anyways, after a run-in with Applejack, Twilight and Spike go back to the treehouse to see Fluttershy doing some spring cleaning during the summer.
But we're all doing a little spring cleaning for you.
It's summer.
Well, better late than never, right?
Which, okay, as much as I dislike Fluttershy, I will admit that joke was pretty funny. What are the implications of Fluttershy singing the theme song? Is this tuned a national anthem or something? More importantly, is there no lock on this door? Can anyone just walk into this building as they so please? Pinkie then shows up and sings this song. And in the song is the line,
Pinkie, cutest, smartest, all-around best pony.
which has been taken by the fandom to describe their favorite characters as best pony. This is a pretty common term that's being used this day, but I'm not sure how many people who actually use the term actually consciously know it all stems from that line. Anyways, Twilight tells her to shut up and everyone around them starts chasing after her to ask for the tickets. I think it's dumb how Golden Harvest / Carrot Top points out which direction they're running to, when everyone else is running the other direction. If everyone was running the wrong direction, wouldn't you keep the information of where Twilight is going a secret so you have a better chance for yourself? Well, when they get cornered, Twilight uses teleport magic to go back home, with her saying,
Warn me next time you're gonna do that.
I didn't even know it was gonna happen.
Is that why you were able to do it intentionally and pretty perfectly in the last fucking episode? Okay, to be fair, this was the very first episode ever written, so I will cut this some slack, but not going forward. Anyways, it turns out that the main 6 were all waiting in the treehouse, and they all forfeit the ticket, saying that it was uncool to stress Twilight over this. Well, all except Rainbow Dash, which results in the best song of the entire show being formed.
I got the ticket. I got the ticket.
Why isn't this on Spotify? Twilight then sends a letter to Princess Celestia saying there's no good in blessings if you can't share them with your friends.
So, though I appreciate the invitation, I will be returning both tickets to the Grand Galloping Gala.
What?
If my friends can't all go, I don't want to go either.
This is a genuinely great lesson since it's showing us the importance of sacrifice. Then this happens.
Well, wallop my wither, Spike. Isn't that just like a boy? Can't handle the least bit of sentiment.
Which I suppose is a good comeback. If you're getting roasted and can't think of a good rebuttal, just burp in your roaster's face. Works every time. I'm not even joking. I tried that in real life. It was pretty funny. So it turns out that Spike burped up Princess Celestia's response, where she sends 4 extra tickets so the entirety of the main 6 can attend. Wow. Praise revoked. I guess sacrifices mean absolutely nothing in this world. Also, we'll come back to Princess Celestia in a bit. For now, I'm focusing on, who's magicking these tickets? This episode was actually the very first written for the show, so are we to assume that every pony type was originally supposed to be able to levitate things with magic? That's just cursed. What else is cursed is how these bees are frozen in time. Well, don't even get me started on those bees. We'll save that for later on. The episode comes to its credits after panning over to Princess Celestia's castle. There's a couple different ways to interpret this. First of all, was this an intentional or accidental lesson? Since she finds out at the end of the previous episode that Twilight has 5 new friends, did Princess Celestia purposefully only send Twilight 2 tickets so that she'd learn how to deal with situations like this? Or was she just being inconsiderate until she was basically called out for it? This actually birthed the Trollestia meme to highlight her seemingly trollish behavior as listed here. Celestia does not give a fuck about anyone. Imprisons her sister to steal her half of the powers over day and night. Knows her sister is coming back but does not tell anyone for lulz. Give her favorite pupil only 2 tickets when she knows she has 5 best friends, then reveals, "Lol, could have given you 6 from the beginning, I troll you." The moral is ancient beings with godlike powers have nothing better to do than troll all day, every day. This aspect of her personality will actually be slightly referenced in a later episode, but we're not quite there yet. In terms of the writing, I'm not actually sure as to how this episode is one of the most important ones of the season, since it kickstarts the whole Grand Galloping Gala storyline, which is basically the overarching plot of season 1, yet feels like such a filler episode. This is probably due to how the last episode dealt with a world-ending supervillain, and now we've jumped all the way down to, I'm not sure who to share this ticket with the conclusion being, oh hey, we got extra tickets for everybody anyway. And I'm sure if this show started with slice of life plots like this, this probably wouldn't feel too much like filler. Though, to be fair, like I said, this was the first full episode written for the show, and when it was being written, the plan was to have the episodes be 11 minutes and not 22, so obviously things would be a little clunky. So I will once again generously cut this episode a lot of slack there. But now that we've had 3 full episodes to establish the main 6 as a group, let us now see how the days in a life of each of them specifically look.
Boy, howdy. I got my work cut out for me.
This episode begins with Applejack telling Big Mac she's gonna harvest all these apples herself, since he's injured and can't help. And while Big Mac, rightfully so, is concerned that she won't be able to handle all this herself,
biting off more than you can chew is just what I'm afraid of.
She defends herself by saying this.
This is your sister Applejack, remember? The loyalest of friends and the most dependable of ponies?
Oh, I'm sorry, my bad. I, for some reason, thought Rainbow Dash was the loyalist friend. I guess that's on me for paying attention. Though the more notable thing here, within the context of the show overall, is how this is Big Mac's first speaking role.
But still only 1 pony. And 1 pony plus hundreds of apple trees just doesn't add up.
And at that, he actually gets multiple full sentences instead of the usual,
yup.
I have no clue if he was originally meant to talk more but realized that his character would work better as a soft-spoken and shy, or what. But this does feel uncharacteristic in retrospect. But still, what if Big Mac wasn't injured here? You're telling me that this is even a 2-pony job? Wouldn't you need at least a team of ponies to harvest all this while the trees are still in season? Also, visually, something I haven't really pointed out yet is how things are very less saturated than things will become in future seasons, and even later on in this season. We'll do a full-on comparison of all that eventually, but for now, I do want to highlight how thick Big Mac's eyelining is here. What the heck? Another thing I'd be remiss to not bring up is how this line is genuinely funny.
And 1 pony plus hundreds of apple trees just doesn't add up.
Don't you use your fancy mathematics to muddy the issue. I said I could handle this harvest, and I'm gonna prove it to you.
I know, dissecting jokes may ruin it for some, but I think there really is something to be analyzed here. The look of utter malice and discontent on Applejack's face, coupled with the linguistics here saying your fancy mathematics, implies that this isn't the first or second or probably like the baker's dozenth time that they got into an argument like this. Since this means that Applejack attributes something as simple as Big Mac saying what essentially boils down to, "You're just one small horse in comparison to this gigantic field," to muddling the issue with not just math, but fancy math in Applejack's eyes. However, the implication of the joke is kind of itself muddled. Like, I think the initial basis and presumption and trajectory of this joke was to fit Applejack into the whole dumb hillbilly type. However, the next line,
I said I could handle this harvest, and I'm gonna gonna prove it to you.
Recontextualizes the previous joke to be within the frame of Applejack just being angry that Big Mac was doubting her abilities and not to be a stereotype trope. So I'm not sure if even the writers of the joke even thought as hard as I just dissected it, but who knows. Maybe it was a subversion of the trope, or maybe the joke of her acting dumb is completely a non sequitur to the point she's actually making. I don't know. All I do know is that 1 second it was hilarious and now it's meh. Though, judging by this gulp here, I suppose we are now in some kind of post-meta limbo space of a subversion of a subversion. Gah. After the theme song, which, yes, we will get back to later, Applejack is about to get started on this arduous task.
Well, I better get kicking.
But these cows start stampeding towards Ponyville. Then we get this visual gag-ish thing, where Carrot Top / Golden Harvest brings her welcome mat into her house with her mouth. That's kind of disgusting. Also, Pinky has this whole bit.
This makes my voice sound silly.
Which is, not particularly funny. There's not much of a joke here aside from have silly voice. Point out she has a silly voice. When that Applejack joke from 5 seconds ago worked on like 5 billion different levels. I guess Twilight does say this afterwards.
Pinkie Pie, are you crazy? Run!
But still, that's not hugely a clever thing to... whatever. The reason I even point this out is because we're about to see another Pinky and Twilight duo joke in a minute, so let us just compare and contrast this joke to that joke when we get to it. Anyways, amidst the townsponys all galloping and scurrying about the cow stampede, we get to see the mayor once again standing in the middle of town, trying to calm everyone down.
There is no need to panic.
So, out of the 4 episodes we've been talking about so far, she's had a speaking role in 3. Not too shabby. It seems like we're getting some world building in Ponyville, seeing non-main 6 characters actually get some speaking roles. Especially how, judging by this exchange,
But Mayor, whatever shall we do?
it seems like she's some kind of like wise mentor type character. Now, what a huge shame would it be if she was eventually phased out of the series, getting rid of all of the backbones for overall show consistency. Applejack comes along and lassos the cows into proper order, where we get this shot. Somebody here doesn't look like she belongs, but honestly, they should have just replaced Fluttershy with Shoeshine as a part of the main 6. I think that would have been way better. Anyways, as the ponies watch Applejack and her dog Winona gather up these cows, we finally get this other Pinky and Twilight combo joke I've been talking about.
This is the best rodeo show I've ever seen.
Which is significantly funnier than the other one. The way that Twilight just has the look of, why is she so retarded, cracks me up every single time. Now, I know a bunch of people will start commenting, why is this guy trying to explain humor? Human is subjective. No, it's not. It really isn't. Sure, what makes you laugh is subjective, and some people might find jokes leaning towards like certain political belief systems funny and vice versa. However, fundamentally, there is a science to jokes based on how you structure and word and paste them and deliver them and stuff, which is why I would argue that it's worth analyzing these jokes just to see how they're structured and written. But anyways, while Applejack is still herding the cows, let's talk about Winona. And more specifically, the point of her inclusion. If there's a character who's essentially supposed to be the sidekick of one of your main characters, it makes sense to introduce her early on into the show like this. And that's what her appearance feels like with how they put her in here rather than not putting her in here. So then the question is, if we look at her character appearance chart, why the heck does she not appear at all for the rest of the season, let alone most of the general show? Well, the answer to that seems to be that the first Applejack brushable was paired with this dog that kind of appears to be Winona. And I guess this was like their way of advertising that. Now, I haven't done any extensive research into this yet, since this is a concept that's definitely going to be explored much more in depth once we get to a deep dive on brushables video, but I did want to make a quick footnote here just for this odd inclusion of a character. Anyways, we get the big reveal that the cows are able to speak.
Oh my! Begging your pardon, Applejack, but Muriella here saw one of those nasty snakes.
Okay, so how come cows are sapient? Are the snakes they're talking about also sapient? Can you reason with them?
And it just gave us all the willies, don't you know?
Also, how convenient is it that the one who got scared just so happened to be the only other non-copy and pasted cow? Also, isn't it kind of funny how Daisy Joe has a Wisconsin accent as a reference to how that's the dairy state and Daisy Joe is a cow? Okay, yes, that's actually kind of clever. It's just curious how she shares the same name as Daisy Joe from G3. Therefore, at that point, why not just call her Dairy Joe? Like, imagine being the ponies from previous generations, and you hear that some of you are going to be brought back in this new generation they're making. And while only 6 of you are going to be lucky enough to be main characters, most of you are still going to get updated toys, or at least have the luxury of being background characters. So put yourself in Daisy Joe's shoes. You're all excited and your mind is going wild with all these thoughts of, I wonder how they're going to redesign me. My friends all turn into cute toys. And you just turn out to be a fat cow instead. What a scam! Either way, before we can give that much thought, Applejack says,
I
completely understand. Just next time, try and steer clear of Ponyville.
Now, is this a pun? Because steer is a cow term, which would suggest it is. But if you look up what steer means in specific, a male domestic bovine animal that has been castrated and is raised for beef. First of all, ow! And second of all, I don't know what the implications of steers existing in this world would be, since the real life reason is to essentially apply animal eugenics so we can get a nice slab of steak, which is a-okay in my books because I'm an omnivore. But this is a world inhabited by herbivores. Why would there be a need to produce literal meatballs in this universe? And don't tell me that this is an unintended pun, since Applejack clearly enunciates the word steer.
Try and steer clear of Ponyville.
Anyways, especially with Daisy Joe bidding Winona farewell,
So long, Winona!
it gives us the impression that Winona is a regular character to the point of her taking along with all sorts of Applejack adventures. But as we'll soon see, no? I guess this really was just an advertisement for the Applejack toy. Also, then we see Ponyvillians cheering for Applejack, and it's kind of dumb how Shoeshine has mysteriously been replaced with Fluttershy. Also, how come Winona gets 0 credit here?
We must do something to thank Applejack for single-hoofedly saving the town.
I guess she technically did say single-hoofedly, rather than single-hoofedly and single-podly. But still! Then we fast forward a week where Pinkie throws this party in Applejack's honor. And we know it's been a week, not because of any visible visual indicator, but through their dialogue, which just actually adds more confusion.
Is Applejack all set? Actually, I haven't seen her all week. Not since the stampede.
Generously going under the assumption that the main 6 has tried checking up on her over the course of the week, just with Applejack being hard to find, would insinuate that she's been MIA, which would mean that there's 0 reason to assume that she'll even be here for the party. We also see that Twilight has a full-on speech prepared, which would make sense if she took the week to write it, but that just all seems like a convenient way to brush off an oversight. This wouldn't have really been a problem if we had an exchange with Pinkie ready to throw a party, but with Applejack saying, nah, I'm a little busy with work stuff, RN, but I promise I'll be here in exactly a week's time. I'll see you guys then. Also, it's kind of too bad that all I can think of when I see this scene is this video that kind of blew up on TikTok and Instagram Reels.
Silly black people. They always think they can accomplish everything by just sitting.
But on a more wholesome note, this is where we get the birth of Rainbow Dash's cutesy face.
This week, she's gonna help me with my new flying trick, and I know it's gonna be so awesome! Exactly!
It's just kind of interesting how even though this shot and her uttering the phrase, so awesome, was memed a lot to convey how Rainbow Dash is awesome, within the context of her speech, she's actually talking about how Applejack is awesome. I guess that kind of just goes to show how easily the context of something like this can be removed for the sake of memes. But on the topic of Applejack,
Miss Meyer, thank you kindly for this here award thingy.
did they just not hang out with or check up on her for a whole week? Some friends they are, and even if she was hard to find, she was literally just bucking apples this whole time. You know, around the place she is widely known to live in. Wow, now ain't that a very realistic depiction of my last 2 brain cells?
Yeah, I like helping the pony folks and stuff.
Why is no one offering to help Applejack when she's clearly unwell? Now you're probably thinking, well, she probably only looks this way so the audience is able to see that she's tired, but it's not enough to tell for the actual characters. Well,
Was it just me, or did Applejack seem a little tired?
so they can tell, and they're just not helping her.
Did you see her mane?
What? Her mane is the one part that actually still looks the exact same. Anyways, Twilight goes up to check on Applejack, where we get this convenient explanation of why her giant family from the first episode can't help around.
Can't they help?
They were just here for the Apple family reunion. They actually live all over Equestria and are busy harvesting their own orchards.
And I wonder if this was always the plan, or if they just came up with this excuse just for the sake of this episode, or what. But whatever the case is, we better not see any of these ponies outside of this context in any other episode.
There you are.
Then she goes on to help Rainbow Dash, who says she needs assistance with this flying trick.
I'm gonna do some amazing flips and spins that are sure to impress the Wonderbolts.
Which I guess this line kind of slipped my mind through previous watch-throughs, but man are they putting a lot of emphasis on Rainbow Dash's Wonderbolts arc this early on. Like, all 4 episodes we've talked about so far revolves Rainbow Dash's appearances around her desire to impress the Wonderbolts. Which is pretty cool. Anyways, if Applejack ain't being injured from all these falls, what the fuck kind of eldritch horrors did Big Mac go through in order for this to happen?
Maybe I wasn't clear. You're supposed to land on the other end.
Got it.
Okay, even with how entitled and selfish Rainbow Dash is acting here, this line...
Applejack, what the hey is going on? I mean, I thought I world's best athlete.
Might be the most humble thing she ever says in the entire show. Anyways, Rainbow Dash ends up at Twilight's with the most convenient landing of all time.
Can I help you?
Where Twilight decides to talk to Applejack about her behavior.
I need to talk to you. You need to walk to the zoo? Well, who's stopping you?
What are the implications of zoos existing here when this episode alone has made us question what animals are sapient and which ones aren't? It would be hilarious if they have human zoos, and the reason why we don't see any humans is because we don't see any zoos either. After refusing Twilight's advice on getting help, Applejack goes on to help Pinkie Pie, who earlier said,
This week, I get to run Sugar Cube Corner for the first time.
It's kind of weird how this business is owned and operated by Mr. and Mrs. Cake, with Pinkie taking over it for this one episode, but we've never actually even seen these two at all in the show so far, let alone running the shop, so this is a bit of an unusual first impression. Also, this exchange is a little curious.
I have Ponyville's prize pony to help me out. Why, she's the best baker ever. Right, Applejack?
No, you're not the best baker ever.
As the wiki puts it, as seen in the first episode, Sweet Apple Acres also caters food for events, in this case the Summer Sun Celebration, meaning the cakes are not without competition in Ponyville. Which is true, so why would Applejack work for her competitors?
Can you get me some chocolate chips?
What was that?
Chocolate chips.
Chips. Okie dokie. What next?
Now, as funny as this is, does Pinkie just not see Applejack doing anything?
Wheat germ.
Wheat worms? Oh, that must be fancy talk for earthworms.
So Ponyvillians all try these bad muffins and all fall ill. And they just so happen to call Twilight for help.
We came as soon as we heard.
Out of every other pony in town over someone who may actually have some kind of knowledge on medicine. Also, sick Pinkie, more like the peachy sweet minifigure. But on that note, it's revealed that these worms are still alive, which is disgusting, since I'm sure these are different types of worms this is talking about, but these ponies could have literally died from this. Also, if you've ever wondered where the whole meme of Derpy liking muffins comes from, it's all due to this one shot. I don't know why that role went to her in specific when this individual looks like she also likes muffins just as much, but sure. The third pony Applejack tries helping is Fluttershy, where we get this appearance of Winona again. Very unusual how she has such a prominent appearance in this one episode, and won't again until like next season. With the two messing everything up, these bunnies escape and cause havoc around Ponyville, and I just love these flower ponies' reactions.
The horror! The horror! It was awful!
A disaster! A horrible, horrible disaster!
Also, just as a funny Easter egg / obscure fact, in the Korean dub of this episode, this part where Twilight is humming this random melody is replaced with this. As a reference to how Twilight's Korean voice actress also voices Anna in the Korean dub of Frozen. That's kinda cool. Speeding up a bit, Applejack finally realizes the error of her ways and accepts help from her friends to clear up all these apples, and...
So while friendship is about giving of ourselves to friends, it's also about accepting what our friends have to offer. Your faithful student, Twilight Sparkle.
Alright, so how do you not feel useless when Twilight is able to do an entire month's work of work in 2 seconds? This is like a huge, I'm not telling you how to do your job, but moment. As the episode ends, we see the first instance of Twilight sending off her letter to Princess Celestia with...
Your faithful student, Twilight Sparkle.
The term Your Faithful Student has become a term heavily associated with My Little Pony, notably with this song / remix by So Great and Powerful, titled Your Faithful Student. I mean, I showed a clip earlier of her using this term in passing, but the fact that it was used in a context like this kind of cements it more of a title rather than the previous usage, which kind of just felt like a throwaway thing. But it's odd how she won't go on to use this term every time she writes a friendship lesson, probably mostly because adding that line would ruin the flow of the delivery of some of the friendship lessons, which makes sense. But I guess this goes to show that something that's not even used in every episode can build up to this big association / meme due to the fandom looking heavily into everything like this. But speaking of the ending of this episode, we end off on this note.
Ew! Spike, I threw those away! Where'd you get them?
From the trash. Just a little nibble? Come on.
I didn't mention Spike's appearance earlier in the episode, and we'll get to why that is later, but jokes involving him seem to be pretty goofy, and I sure can't wait to see if he'll stay as a comic relief, or if we'll see some depth to him later on. Overall, this episode does a good job expanding on the main six's hobbies, since we basically get to see them all in their natural habitat exploring their passions, or at least besides Rarity, though she was originally supposed to be in this episode, but was cut for time. But speaking of original drafts, according to this now obscure forum post, relaying what the then showrunner Jason Thiessen said at the September 2011 BronyCon, which was the second BronyCon ever held, the original vision of this episode was originally about apple bumping, i.e. Applejack would harvest apples by ramming trees with her head. But Hasbro said, maybe that's not quite the kind of thing we want to be encouraging kids to do, you know? So they rejiggered the concept into apple bucking, which works as a drop-in replacement to the story, making it about sleep deprivation instead. So apple bucking ends up both becoming an iconic Applejack thing, and the story turns out quite a bit more fun than a lesson about repetitive long-term cranial trauma. That would have been quite something. Though it doesn't seem like this idea was that heavily considered or got too far into development, seeing that Applejack apple bucks rather than apple bumps in the theme song. Also, I might as well just say this now, but the reason I have footage over this event playing in the background when I read the blurb instead of playing the clip of it is because that part of the panel wasn't filmed. So the reason I even point this out is because we're going to be referencing this clip every once in a while, and it would have probably come across as very arbitrary if I didn't specify all this. Anyways, now that the show's had the previous 3 episodes to build on the main 6's dynamic as a whole, I think this one did a good job focusing on a particular one out of the 6, since, you know, that results in an episode with more focus. But with that out of the way, let's now move on to our first duo episode.
Fighting action overload! She was like a stunt superstar, flying higher and higher, and then Rainbow Dash swooped down, swoosh!
The premise of the beginning of this episode is interestingly very similar to the test pilot, with Pinkie talking to a reading Twilight and a flying Rainbow Dash. Wow, cool to see Twilight using her snout to turn pages rather than magic. Isn't this going to result in getting snot in your book? I think it's both mean and funny how she sighs a sigh of relief after Pinkie gets distracted by Rainbow Dash.
Phew.
I mean, we gotta enjoy all these semblances of early show antisocial Twilight while we still have the chance. Also, isn't it interesting how they redesigned Twilight's reading position? Anyways, Pinkie tries to get Rainbow Dash's attention just for Rainbow Dash to ignore her, and while doing so, she slams into a cliff.
I said not now!
With Pinkie saying,
I was gonna tell you to look out for that mountain.
which is pretty funny and reminds me of this issue of Calvin and Hobbes. It's not like the problem messenger couldn't have just cut to the chase and yelled out the problem to begin with. Anyways, despite the fact that Hatchie just stopped for a total of 2 seconds to listen to Pinkie earlier, Rainbow Dash would have prevented herself from being injured, she decides to continue avoiding Pinkie.
Hi, I'm looking for Rainbow Dash. Have you seen her? Hi there. Have you seen Rainbow Dash? Okay, thanks anyway.
Which, damn, I guess she's just that annoying. Twilight rats out Dash's hiding spot, leading into this running away / chase scene.
That was close. Hi again! I need a favor, Rainbow Dash.
I think it's worth noting how, once again, this style of humor is obviously very Hanna-Barbera-esque, especially akin to the Droopy Show.
Sure was a cinch getting rid of that little mutt.
That's what you think, brother.
Which actually ties in with the vibe of the test animation, where it used a bunch of Hanna-Barbera sound effects, and was more slapstick focused like their cartoons. I point this out because that seems to have been the original vision, or at least the direction the show wanted to go. But without jumping too much ahead, this style of humor seems to fade out over the later episodes and seasons, in favor of more situational jokes rather than slapstick. A difference like this is probably one of the reasons that makes the early seasons feel tonally distinct from modern MLP. And whether viewers consciously pick this fact up or not, I think intuition kinda notices these things, which is where the feeling of nostalgia comes in. I mean, for me at least. Rainbow Dash gives up on trying to run away, and Pinkie reveals that she wants to pull a couple pranks with her. The first one being causing a small thunderstorm to scare Spike, which is led up by this filler.
Over to the right. No, a little left. Oh, wait, back to the right. Now, a little leftish while staying rightly. Stop. Maybe a few inches to the south. And now a couple centimeters north. Okay. One more smidge meter to the...
which eventually leads to this. A billion questions, Your Honor. Firstly, what's with Spike humming the song? I will once again just assume this is Equestria's national anthem. Secondly, isn't Spike accidentally sending all these letters to Celestia, the dragon version of butt dialing? Thirdly, pulling any sort of pranks that directly or indirectly involve the princess seems like you're playing with fire, but okay. Also, I'm not sure if this is even worth mentioning, but for the sake of leaving no stone left unturned, the original draft of the scene had scarier thunderclouds and Rainbow Dash's leg/arm around Pinkie for some reason. Well, while Spike is hiccuping, this happens.
You're not hurt, are you?
Nice to see that Pinkie is fine with messing up the princess's workload, but draws the line at Spike being injured, while also simultaneously saying that this is the funniest thing she's ever seen.
Have you ever seen anything more hilarious?
Their next prank is putting sneezing powder in a batch of flowers to deliver to Rarity. Holy frick, they fixed her horn for real! But that's still a short-lived victory when you realize how aren't they lucky that Rarity's initial instinct was to sniff the flowers? Like, what if she went straight to attempting to eat them? That can't be healthy for digestion. Not to mention how Pinkie and Rainbow Dash literally teleport.
Is she even home? I don't know. This is gonna be...
Their third prank is somehow sneaking into Twilight's treehouse and replacing her quill ink with disappearing ink, while she's trying to take notes on potion experimentation. Well, that seems dangerous. What if that results in an explosion or something? Have they gone mad? This could have ended up so much worse. Also, how convenient is it that Rainbow Dash holds up this invisible ink thing to show us what's going on? But how the f did they even sneak into Twilight's house and replace the ink anyway? Is that where their apparent teleportation powers from earlier come in? Though, if you thought that was bad, their fourth prank involves painting every tree in Sweet Apple Acres zany colors without Applejack noticing. I mean, not just without Applejack noticing, but all this in a short amount of time, and with their mouths, when the apples are elevated all the way up here. At least with Rarity's prank, it's over in like 2 seconds, but this one is gonna set the entire family business back by at least a couple days having to wash off all this paint. Speaking of which, Applejack was pissed off to the point where she started throwing these painted apples at Rainbow Dash and Pinkie, only calming down after the paint gets washed away in this barrel. She even giggles at this fact. Which is stupid, since what is this even trying to say? Was she unsure what was going on with these apples and thought that these two somehow permanently deformed her products? Because that would explain why she was mad enough to throw these apples at them, but did she somehow not see how they literally had paint material on them when she was presumably looking in their direction while these apples were being thrown? Or did she just not know that the paint could come off? I don't know, this is dumb. Then Rainbow Dash takes initiative to pull their fifth prank on Fluttershy, with Pinkie asking,
Is someone over there? Who are we gonna squirt? Who are we gonna squirt?
wow, the previous 4 pranks were on the rest of the main 6. I wonder who this one could possibly be for. Well, when Rainbow Dash reveals that it's for Fluttershy, Pinkie seems to draw the line here, saying,
What? No. We can't prank Fluttershy. I mean, she's so sensitive. It'll hurt her feelings. Even our most harmless prank.
Okay, so based on this logic, pranking a literal baby, messing up the princess's workload, causing potentially nuclear explosions, and ruining a small family-owned business is okay, but my feelings is where you draw the line. This is probably another reason I hate Fluttershy so much, just because everyone around her wants to give her special treatment rather than just letting her experience hurt so she can actually grow as a person. Not to mention how this information has literally zero payoff on the rest of the episode whatsoever. It's literally only in here to deliver the information that Fluttershy deserves special treatment since she's her, and nothing else of substance. Didn't we already know that Fluttershy is super sensitive based on how she's shy and not the one to assert herself to get her way? If they actually went through with the prank, they could have shown us the fact that Fluttershy is sensitive to stuff like this, rather than just spelling it out through dialogue. Her scene in the Ticketmaster did an excellent job at doing this.
I would just like to ask, if it would be alright if you haven't given it to someone else.
So why didn't they do it here? Anywho, Rainbow Dash agrees that they should prank someone tougher.
Who? Do I know them?
Is that A Clockwork Orange reference? The next day, when Pinkie visits Rainbow Dash's house to do more pranks, this griffin appears, and Rainbow Dash introduces the two to each other. Whatever, we shall analyze Gilda as a character more in depth later, but for now, I want to dial it back to a couple seconds ago. Was the sun not just rising? And wasn't the last shot of the previous day the sun setting? The fact that Pinkie and Rainbow Dash are up super early aside, are you telling me that Gilda showed up to Rainbow Dash's house after sunset but before sunrise? An argument may be, well, Gilda probably just showed up to Rainbow Dash's house last night and they had a sleepover. Okay, if that's the case, why does she say,
Gilda just got here. We'll catch up with you later.
Another argument could be, maybe the sunrise was only there for artistic purposes and it's actually the afternoon right now. Okay, if that's the case, why does Pinkie say,
Rise and shine, Rainbow Dash. It's a brand new day.
Essentially, Gilda starts getting mad that Rainbow Dash has a new friend and tries dividing a wedge between them. And that's pretty much a good chunk of the episode, moments such as... However, one of the problems with this episode is how, while we're supposed to find Gilda as the villain who we should be rooting against, Pinky's just being persistent and annoying. As this listing on TV Tropes says perfectly, unintentionally unsympathetic, Pinkie Pie. Anyone who's ever traveled a long way to visit a close friend that moved away, only to have one of said friends, new local friends, constantly horn in on everything you want to do together and try to dominate their time as well, may find themselves sympathizing with Gilda instead, jerk or not. And while I can't necessarily say I've ever been in Gilda's situation, I can guarantee it would piss me off if I ever was or if I ever am. I'm so glad Pinky gets roasted here.
Don't you know how to take get lost for an answer? Dash doesn't need to hang with a dweeb like you now that I'm around. You're darking up the sky, stinky pie. So make like a bee. Buzz off!
Hey, where's Pinkie Pie and her crazy contraption?
She left. Something about being as busy as a bee.
In fact, the episode realizes all this since when Pinky consults Twilight on this matter, Twilight says,
So, Pinkie Pie, are you sure that this friend of Rainbow Dash is really so mean?
Yeah! She keeps stealing Rainbow Dash away, she popped my balloons, and she told me to buzz off!
You know what I think, Pinkie Pie? Well, I think you're jealous.
which is, facts, but we'll go much more in detail on that later. To cheer herself up, Pinky goes to the town square and sees Gilda stealing fruit and pranking Granny Smith.
A rattler! A rattler! Run for the hills! Everybody run, save yourselves!
Similar to this scene from earlier, we have insight into the animation process here, with the first version of the scene looking like this.
Run for the hills! Everybody run, save yourselves!
But as the animator here notes, the flag in the background wasn't animated here, and also her movement went on for too long, so he shortened it. The video lists a whole lot of subtle detail that I won't really go into the nitty-gritty of, but I did want to showcase this here, just to show how much thought goes into stuff like this. Also, Gilda makes Fluttershy cry, which is based... Then, Pinky throws a party for some reason, and while the main six are mingling, Rarity says,
Who's this Gilda I've heard nothing about? I hear she's an old friend of Rainbow Dash, a griffin, so rare.
Griffins are rare. Based on what? Is the griffin population just smaller than the pony population, or huh? Also, if this is how Fluttershy is going to act upon the mere mention of Gilda...
You've met Gilda, right? What's she like?
Oh, well, I'll tell you later, Twilight.
Why did she even show up to this party? Speaking of which, this exchange happens.
Your Auntie Pinkie Pie's got it all taken care of. I'm a year older than you.
I love how this one throwaway line unknowingly causes problems not meant for human minds to comprehend later down the line. Just kidding. No, I don't love that. How are lethal shocks funny, even as a prank? How is this socially acceptable? I'm surprised she didn't turn to rotisserie chicken.
Oh, Pinkie Pie, the old hoof shake buzzer.
Hoof shake buzzer. Oh, well, no wonder why Gilda didn't see that coming then, since she don't got no hooves to shake. In the background, there's some birds providing music, which is somewhat of a callback for the very first episode, so that's neat. But are birds in this universe basically like music speakers or the radio? Doesn't it suck, since that means that if you ever want to listen to music in this universe, you need to teach these birds the song you want to listen to first? Anyways, speeding up a bit here, Gilda flips out from falling into every prank that was set up in this party and storms out, saying,
When you decide not to be lame anymore, give me a call.
How do you give calls in this world without calling technology? The only form of long-distance communication we've seen thus far is sending letters via dragon. I'm not too sure either Rainbow Dash or Gilda owns a dragon. Well, Rainbow Dash stands up for Pinky and tells Gilda to leave if this is how she's gonna treat her friends.
No, this is not how I thought my old friends would treat my new friends. If being cool is all you care about, maybe you should go find some new cool friends someplace else.
And yes, this episode was made to show that Rainbow Dash really is loyal, but isn't she technically not being loyal to Gilda by not asking for her perspective? I just think they should have made a bigger deal on the discernment of what kind of factors deserve loyalty, and which actions deserve reprimanding. As the audience, we saw Gilda do all that awful stuff, but in Rainbow Dash's perspective, literally all that happened was Gilda got pissed off because she got pranked to death and everyone laughed at her. That seems like a pretty justified response on Gilda's part. Rainbow Dash and Pinky do the hoof shake prank thing on each other, but we don't see the ponies as skeletons when they get electrocuted, like we saw with Gilda. That's strange, unless if Pinkie intentionally somehow made the shock on Gilda stronger than on Rainbow Dash, which is evil. Also, isn't it sexy how Rarity's horn goes from good to bad between frames? The lesson Twilight learns is that
Learn that it's hard to accept when some pony you like wants to spend time with some pony who's not so nice. Though it's impossible to control who your friends hang out with, it is possible to control your own behavior.
And I think that's a pretty good lesson, no complaints here. Does it apply to Pinkie's situation whatsoever? No, not really, but it's still a good lesson in a vacuum. With the plot of the episode out of the way, let's finally address the elephant in the room, or rather the griffin in the room. Looking at Lauren Faust's DeviantArt gives us a bit of insight into Gilda's character. This was the very first sketch of Gilda for the 2008 MLP FIM Pitch Bible, before she got her bad attitude. At that time, I didn't have her character worked out, I just had a section about magical creatures and drew a griffin for it. Once we want to script with Grouchy Gilda, her original name was Griselda, but it didn't pass legal. I think it's kind of interesting how Gilda's original name was supposed to be Griselda, which also appears in the audition script for the part of Apple Bloom. And while we're here, it's also notable how Apple Bloom was supposed to have this line.
Relighting birthday candles, I love that prank! What a classic!
Either that or they just gave her this part just for the audition to have more lines, because they didn't have enough actual Apple Bloom lines ready. But that seems like clickbait for the voice actress. Anyways, I know more griffins appear later in the show, but it's still worth analyzing episodes within the perspective and context of watching these episodes back when they originally came out. So we must ask, how the f does Gilda exist? Where did she come from? Will she show up ever again in the show? In retrospect, we have answers to all these questions and then some, but it took until season 5 for any of this to be established. In fact, the Jason Thiessen Q&A I mentioned earlier actually made mention of this.
Is Gilda an illegal immigrant when she goes to Ponyville? Next question.
And also one with an actual answer here.
We haven't really figured that out yet. We may have to invent a new place or something. Yeah, griffins just exist there as far as we know. Not everything is planned out ahead of time. Sometimes it's figured out as we go.
At least this was all good fanfic fodder all the way back then. In-world questioning aside, as I've made pretty clear, I have actual meta writing problems with this episode as well. In fact, this listing on, once again, TV tropes pretty much takes the words right out of my mouth, so let's give it a read. Gilda blowing up at the party guests after being pranked one too many times, automatically blaming Pinkie Pie for setting the pranks up to target her specifically, and walking out on Rainbow Dash when she admits to doing it herself, and demands that Gilda has to accept her friends if she wants to continue being friends with her, is completely understandable. Gilda had been the sole receiver of a long list of pranks during a party Pinkie Pie herself set up. The party guests, including Rainbow's friends, repeatedly laughed at Gilda's humiliation, and Rainbow Dash doesn't even attempt to apologize or take responsibility for her part in upsetting one of her closest friends. This is pretty much what I meant by how this probably wasn't the best way of showing that Rainbow Dash is the element of loyalty, since it pretty much required her to cut ties with a friend without either of them really taking the time to explain themselves to each other. By the same token, it's hard to blame Gilda for being at least a little angry at Pinkie Pie for trying to weasel in on her time with Rainbow Dash, especially since they hadn't seen each other in a long time. The closest anyone ever gets to calling Pinkie out for her own clingy behavior is Twilight, who's made to apologize for it at the end. It even brought up this super good point that didn't even actually cross my mind while watching the episode. Gilda yelling at Fluttershy for bumping into her is a legitimate complaint, as Fluttershy had been walking backwards in the middle of a busy market street and not really paying attention to her surroundings. Exactly. Fluttershy. No, not literally. Now, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I like Gilda or whatever, since this may be an unpopular opinion, but I just don't find the griffins all that interesting, let alone Gilda in specific. However, sure, let's make a new creature who isn't the pony evil and inconsiderate, and let's all isolate and marginalize the one guy who isn't the pony. Great lesson. This idea was made into a song by Jackalapp called Winter, which is definitely one of my favorite pony fan songs.
I once saw you running from them, what did they do to you? They turned you into a fool, but you're nobody's fool. They don't know you like I know you, all those ponies are the same. I swear I will go away, I swear I will go away.
Especially the remix by the Living Tombstone, like holy crap, this is awesome.
There's a girl that I know, as white as a winter's blanket snow, but I know, her heart is longing for someone to call.
One last thought I want to leave this episode on is how people back then saw this bird guy and thought, man, I want myself a piece of that, and waifu'd her. I mean, this was before she was fully characterized, along with all the other Griffins in Season 5. So, I can't say I exactly see what about her character was all that attractive based on this episode. Like, I mean, this episode didn't exactly have Gilda put her best foot forward, but, no judgment, I suppose. What a thought to leave this episode on. Oh boy, it's the Trixie episode. It's odd how a character as well liked as Trixie originated on such a lackluster episode, but I'm getting a little ahead of ourselves.
Come on, Twilight, you can do it!
Okay.
The episode starts off with Twilight participating in animal experimentation. Huh? Anyways, Spike is convinced that this mustache alone will be the key to getting Rarity to becoming a pedophile.
Hello, Rarity! What's that? Just my awesome mustache.
Sorry, Romeo.
Romeo? So, Pony Shakespeare exists? Or are we to assume that Equestria is actually a post-apocalyptic Earth, where humans existed years ago, and the works of the actual Shakespeare has survived that even with an apocalypse happening, inhabitants of this planet continue to discuss and reference his plays?
As attractive and enticing as you look, it's just for practice and it's gotta go.
Wait!
But why does it have to go? Shouldn't this practice also test the longevity of your spells? And what the is the point of testing this spell in the first place anyway?
Rats.
Interesting how Spike says rats when rats apparently don't even appear in the show ever. Mice appear, but not rats. After the theme song, we get some excellent world building through dialogue.
I thought unicorns were only supposed to have a little magic that matches their special talents.
True, for ponies whose talents are for things like cooking or singing or math. But what if a unicorn's special talent is magic?
We're really struggling with show don't tell, huh? At least it kinda solves the seeming plot hole that there's a bunch of magic-wielding unicorns roaming about everywhere, but they usually only ever use their magic to lift and carry things. But before we can analyze that, we get interrupted by being introduced to the two best characters in the entire franchise, Snips and Snails. I know the majority of people who are fans of the show probably can't stand these two and think that they have an annoying voice or ugly designs, but I can't help but see them as like really goofy and funny. Sure, it's a little questionable how Snails' cutie mark is essentially describing the fact that he quite possibly has some kind of, medically speaking, mental retardation. Wait, then why isn't my cutie mark a snail? Snips and Snails tell Twilight and Spike that there's this brand new unicorn in town who's really good at magic.
They say that she's got more magical powers than any other unicorn ever!
Where we see Twilight make this expression, which shows us some vulnerability in her character, I suppose. We'll come back to this later. For now, they end up going to this new unicorn and...
Come and witness the amazing magic of the great and powerful Trixie!
Wow, how convenient is their timing that they made it just in time for the beginning of the show? Whatever, this entire scene is just kind of unpleasant and hard to watch. Trixie goes off about how she's great, with the main six trying to show that they're greater, all while Twilight is scared to outdo her magic, since she's scared that her friends will think that she's a show-off, despite the fact that those very friends are trying to outdo her magic. At least we get this exchange.
They don't call me Rainbow and Dash for nothing. When Trixie is through, the only thing they'll call you is Loser.
Roasted! But speaking of, according to the wiki, when this episode first aired on Treehouse TV in Canada, an entire sentence with the word loser was muted in the scene where Trixie is taunting Rainbow Dash. Now, I couldn't find any actual footage of this anywhere, but does that mean that the entire scene would have played out like this? That's dumb. Anyways, this happens.
No! Green hair! Not green hair! Well, I never.
Surely there are some other green-haired ponies you could have used for this joke? Did they really have to recolor the mane of an already existing character for, like, no reason?
Once again, the great and powerful Trixie has proven herself to be the most amazing unicorn in all of Equestria.
Interesting how Trixie calls herself the greatest unicorn rather than the greatest magic user or the greatest pony, which as a writing rhetoric is good for making her egotistical, but in universe, she's essentially putting down about give or take 1/3 of her potential audience. And that's sort of the main problem with this episode. Trixie is a show pony, therefore it's kind of her job to exaggerate and hype herself up. Who wants to see a show pony that's all guys, I'm perfectly adequate at magic and my skill level is similar to you guys. That would be stupid. But for doing her job, she gets punished, but we'll get there when we get there. Snips and Snails keep glazing Trixie and talk about how she vanquished a creature called the Ursa Major. But because Spike doesn't buy it, they decide to bring one out to get her to do it again in front of everybody. Which, spoiler alert, Trixie essentially gets exposed for being a fraud, with Twilight having to bail everyone out, giving milk to this Ursa Major, where we get this line of a cow saying, that is quite something. I mean, yeah, I'll take you up on your offer, but what kind of dialogue is this? Whatever, we've got bigger things to worry about, such as, let's not get distracted from the fact that Snips and Snails are directly responsible for the entirety of Ponyville almost undergoing total destruction.
We deserve whatever punishment you give us.
For starters, you can clean up this mess.
So what is their punishment for almost destroying the entire town?
Should I give them number 25?
25, yes. And I think I deserve it too.
I think you're right.
Sweet!
Well, that's stupid. From a writer's perspective, sure, the mustache spell at the beginning was theoretically a decent use of Chekhov's gun. However, the entire scene at the beginning was already questionable as it is, and this ending sure isn't a logical solution nor a satisfying one. So, this is just nonsense. But we shall come back to this idea later. We learned that the bear they brought over was actually an Ursa Minor, and an Ursa Major actually looks like this. That's totally not terrifying whatsoever. This is made even more terrifying when you look at this concept art scale thing, comparing the size of the Ursa Major to a normal pony. Not to mention this initial sketch of the Ursa Major. I'm glad they changed it. So the episode concludes with Spike saying,
So, how did it go with Rarity?
She didn't go for the mustache.
Oh really? That's odd. I thought having facial hair was the make or break for people becoming interspecies pedophiles. I was sure it would work. Now, I know I skimmed over this episode more than the others so far, but that's because the specifics of this episode was really more humor-based, more than anything worthy of serious dissection or analysis. Heck, the episode literally introduced Snips and Snails, who are the definition of comic relief with no actual character. And that's fine because the humor in this episode is genuinely funny.
Snails, you thinking what I'm thinking?
Why is it they call it a flea market when they don't really sell fleas?
Yeah, oh, come on.
I know a lot of people find these guys to be repulsive, but I personally really like their dynamic with each other, and by extension, their dynamic with Spike.
No, but
nothing. The proof is in the pudding.
I like pudding.
I really think that if they were more recurring, these two could have given Spike a chance to solve some problems himself and perhaps give him some more depth, rather than just having Spike be the one who gives Twilight's character depth all the time. Because with what we've seen thus far, despite having just as much, if not more screen time than the rest of the main six, his entire inclusion really is just for Twilight to build off of. So having these two dimwits be reused in similar contexts in other episodes could have been a good opportunity for Spike to have something to build off of. Though, like what I said about Mayor, it sucks how Snips and Snails were eventually phased out of prominence as the show went on as well. Though, speaking of Twilight, it's a little weird seeing how passive and insecure she is in this episode.
We knew you had ability, but not that much.
I'm sorry. Please don't hate me.
Similar to what I said about Big Mac talking more often than usual earlier, I'm not sure if this was how she was always supposed to be when the series started off, or if this episode just did a bad job writing her character. Everything previous to this, we saw that she was assertive, willing to tell her friends to f off if they're bothering her, but now she suddenly can't be asked to just briefly put herself out there in order to shoo away this pony that all her friends clearly dislike. But building off of that, once again, from a writer's perspective, I think this episode was just aiming for pure humor and for that one specific lesson Twilight learns, rather than anything indicative of like world building or serious character study. And that's fine, it's just a little jarring is all. Though we will go much more in depth on this topic later. Looking at discussions of this episode, the most common talking point really seems to be how, once again, Trixie is a performer and the main six are being petty. I get it. Trixie was arrogant and overly boastful. She lied. She's a stage performer though. That's kind of required. And while she was a bit mean in the way she lashed out to criticism, the main six were being an awful crowd. Booing the performer and downplaying her achievements, just shut up and enjoy the show. So much wrong with this episode. Trixie wasn't innocent, but she sure as hell didn't deserve what happened to her. The main six got what they deserved, I feel. They talked trash and got put in their place. Shouldn't have had to happen in the first place. And I'd agree that the signals this episode seems to be giving out is how the main six can't just enjoy a performance and would rather get personally offended at the fact that someone's putting on a show. Not to mention how one may argue that Rainbow Dash shouldn't be the one to be saying stuff like this.
Trixie's just a loudmouth.
When she also acts like this.
Just because one has the ability to perform lots of magic does not make one better than the rest of us.
Especially when you got me around being better than the rest of us.
Which, yeah, is hypocritical, but for this, at least they're self-aware with it.
There's no need to go strutting around and showing off like that. Oh? That's my job.
I think, if anything, that was at least a good way to show that Trixie is just that annoying and painful. But even then, Trixie really didn't do anything that the main six didn't bring onto themselves. So the entire episode kind of falls apart. Especially when these guys in the back don't do anything. It's just the main six that decide to speak up. At least it wasn't boring, though. There was an actual threat in it, the Ursa Minor, which gives us higher stakes than something like not knowing who to share a ticket with. Plus, it is pretty interesting to see in retrospect that a lot of people's favorite pony originated on such a bad episode. Though, now that's making me wonder if people only dislike this episode in retrospect because they grew to like Trixie from later episodes. And this episode just puts her in a bad light. But speaking of Trixie, according to Goddess Faust, the premise called for a boastful unicorn, originally a boy actually, and Chris Savino came up with Trixie and the hilarious way she talks in the third person. I wonder what the thought process behind all that was. Anyways, fun fact, according to this little post divulging information involving concept art and stuff like that, these ponies were actually supposed to appear in this episode, but they didn't until a few seasons in, yet were released as minifigures before they appeared in the show. That's kind of dumb, and I wonder why they weren't included in this episode. Another fun-ish fact, this is the first episode where the entirety of the main six aren't given lines. Pinkie and Fluttershy are seen standing in the crowd, but apparently have no reaction to their friends getting roasted on stage. The trivia section on IMDb says, Andrea Libman has already recorded her lines as Fluttershy and Pinkie, who are going to give Twilight advice on how to defeat Trixie, but all of her lines are cut due to time limits. I am not sure what the validity of this statement is, with how IMDb doesn't require you to provide sources or anything for trivia, and I can't find anything to back this up. And this has such a stupid typo in it, I'm inclined to not believe this. Shame. If this is true, that's kind of dumb since there's this one scene I didn't even bring up because it's super redundant and unnecessary. So if they took out Pinkie and Fluttershy scenes in order to include this part, that's just bad writing. Or maybe it was a case of animation budgeting, with this scene just being cheaper to animate. Still, especially because Pinkie and Fluttershy are perhaps the most emotionally sensitive ones out of the main six, I think they would have brought some nice dynamic to the rest of the group trying to outdo Trixie. Perhaps trying to talk her down instead of trying to outperform her. If we had an instance of Pinkie where Fluttershy trying to offer kindness to Trixie instead of immediately rushing to one-up her, with Trixie still saying no, I think that would have given us more of a reason to actually side with the main six in this episode. But speaking of Fluttershy, time for our first episode with my least favorite pony in existence as the starring role. I know pretty much everyone is in unanimous agreement that Fluttershy is the cutesy, adorable one of the group, but this episode just makes her seem so frustrating to be around. But once again, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. The episode starts with Fluttershy playing God by deciding what species gets to live or die. That's kind of messed up. Also, this reaction Fluttershy makes when feeding these birds these worms did make me laugh. It's so random and it caught me off guard. But that doesn't mean I like her now. Angel Bunny starts coughing, which is the result of the smog in the sky. I know I've glossed over his previous appearances, but that was so that I can say this here. It's weird seeing Applejack's Brushable being paired up with what is supposed to be Winona, with Fluttershy also being paired up with what you would assume, based on that logic, is Angel. However, I'm not sure if this is actually supposed to be Angel. Not because they look too dissimilar or whatever, since I'm sure most people who see this will count it as Angel, but because there's this bunny at the beginning of the episode, who matches this toy bunny's appearance to a T. What the f? So judging by how every other bunny here are copy and pastes of each other, did they design this one in specific to be Fluttershy's main pet instead, yet changed their mind? How do you explain this? And also glad to see that this one random bunny gets to be super accurate in a toy form when they can barely do the same for their main characters. Fluttershy tries getting people to notice this frankly hard to miss smog in the sky, and I actually like the scene. The backgrounds aren't so empty anymore, and it's nice seeing all these ponies hanging around. Even though seeing that this one area is crowded does put into question how empty backgrounds were so far. Also, guess there's another Apple family event going on, seeing Apple Bumpkin sitting around. Coincidentally, Fluttershy runs into Rainbow Dash.
6, 47.
What is she counting? It's presumed to be how many times the ball's bouncing, but the ball bounces multiple times between her counts, so and wow, how goofy. Anyways, this happens.
1, 2, 3, 4.
And we get a glimpse of Lyra and Shoeshine sitting on this bench, which was pointed out by an obtuse viewer on 4chan, and thus spawned memes as well. Notably, the entire idea that Lyra wants to be or is fascinated with humans.
Human beings fascinate me, being just the way they are. Tell me, little pony, can you push a cart or drive a car?
Twilight comes in and tells these ponies that Princess Celestia said this smog is coming from a dragon.
Listen up! Smoke is spreading over all of Equestria. I've just received a letter from Princess Celestia informing me that—
Wow, how awkward must it be that Twilight's Canterlot friends are here listening to her. But on that topic, man, are these guys lucky or what that backgrounds decided to not be empty for a change, so that Twilight was able to conveniently tell all of them all this at once. Also, great thing that our little 3.5 hour journey through Blind Bakes has corrupted and infected my brain to the point that when I see scenes like this, all I can see is this. Now, this is basically where the episode proper starts, with Twilight explaining to her friends that Princess Celestia has given them this mission to eradicate the dragon, or else. And while Twilight is doing so, Rainbow Dash randomly salutes, and people took this and started editing it on top of pretty much every flag imaginable. Like, I can't tell if the show just included a lot of these exploitable images that are open to becoming memes on purpose, or if this fandom just makes memes of everything. Either way, I like it. Then we get this montage of them getting ready, which is pretty cool.
Let's go!
Let's not?
Though it would have been cooler if Rainbow Dash kept this makeup thing throughout the entire episode, instead of getting rid of it in the very next shot.
But we've all got to keep a good pace if we expect to make it up the mountain by nightfall.
Mountain?
Maybe all the Fluttershy ranting I've been doing on my channel could be considered bullying the disabled, since what do you mean, mountain?
Mountain?
You're the one who saw it coming from the mountain in the first place. I didn't realize you were either blind or had some kind of like memory issue. But speaking of which, I know a lot of people ask me why I don't like Fluttershy. Well, we'll have a lot of time to examine why throughout this retrospective, but I don't think this episode helps me like her at all, and I'm on Team Rainbow Dash this whole episode.
Are you sure you want Fluttershy to come along? I mean, that pony's afraid of her own shadow. She's just gonna slow us down.
Like, the entire episode is filled with Rainbow Dash justly roasting Fluttershy.
It's so high.
Well, it is a mountain.
And once again, remind me to take a shot for every instance of Applejack biting Rainbow Dash's tail later on.
I hear the only thing that sparkles more than the dragon's scales are the jewels they use to build their nests. If I play my cards right, I might be able to convince him to part with a few.
Welcome to my cave, Rarity. Care for a diamond? Roar!
That wasn't particularly funny, but I guess we have to show everyone laughing to remind us that Pinkie is the element of laughter. But then Twilight goes on to crap all over that fact.
Girls, this is no laughing matter.
Then we get this triple roast whammy.
Hey, what are you waiting for? An invitation?
It's so steep.
Well, it is a cliff. You could just, I don't know, fly up here?
Roast it again, and again, and again. The thing is, I'm not sure if Rainbow Dash is supposed to be unlikable here, and we are supposed to side with Fluttershy, but if that's the case, why would you make Fluttershy so annoying and make Rainbow Dash correct?
We're entering an avalanche zone. The smallest peep could cause a huge rock slide.
She's constantly holding everybody back when she knows that Ponyville will be dead if they don't hurry up.
We don't have time for this. I'll need this if I'm gonna take her around the mountain another way. Round the mountain? That's gonna take them forever. We made it. Told you it was gonna take them forever.
Like, even before Twilight told her this,
We must not fail. If we do, Equestria will be covered in smoke for the next 100 years.
she said herself this.
We're all gonna have to start over in a new village.
So, Pinkie then tells Fluttershy to hop, skip, and jump across this mountain, which, to her credit, she actually attempts.
Yep.
Just don't look down.
Okay, that one was Twilight's fault, I concede. And as they approach the cave the dragon resides in, Pinkie is seen with Boneless? Never mind, we're getting way too ahead of ourselves. Then Fluttershy gets too scared to go in and... Oh. So Rainbow Dash says...
Oh, great. She's scared of caves now, too.
Which is an excellent roast, but it is stupid since none of her friends clue in on what she's scared of here.
I'm not scared of caves. I'm scared of...
What's that, Sugar Cube?
I'm scared of dragons.
What?
I'm scared of dragons.
And, dragons actually are scary.
But Fluttershy...
Also, what kind of character placement is this? Huh? But still, is this even a question?
You have a wonderful talent dealing with all kinds of animals.
Yes, because they're not dragons.
We've seen you walk right up to a horrible manticore like it was nothing.
Yes, because he wasn't a dragon.
Spike is a dragon. You're not scared of him.
Because he's not a huge, gigantic, terrifying, enormous, teeth-gnashing, sharp scale-having horn.
Shouldn't this all be common sense, or are ponies just naturally not scared of gigantic dragons? Anyways, because Twilight actually cares about not dying, she shoots her shot at trying to rid the dragon, and this happens.
He probably just doesn't realize what he's doing. Right?
Yeah.
Sure.
If you say so.
Which is pretty much the same thing as her friends basically leaving her to die, which is funny. What else is funny is Rarity's attempt to get him out.
But I couldn't possibly head back home without mentioning what handsome scales you have. Personally, I think you should skip the snoozing and be out there, showing them off. Obviously, I would be more than happy to keep an eye on your jewels while you're gone.
I know people may not like Rarity on the account of her, I don't know, being selfish or whatever, but it's funny when a main cast of characters have a slight hate for each other. Nothing like big, obviously, to the point where it's like unhealthy or toxic, but it's just also a little bit more meaningful that they remain as friends if they have stuff like this.
I was this close to getting that diamond.
You mean getting rid of that dragon?
Oh, yeah.
After Rainbow Dash gives the dragon a little nudge,
Get out!
this happens.
How dare you! You do not, I repeat, you do not hurt my friends!
Wasn't he technically hurting all of her friends since the beginning of the episode? By Fluttershy's logic, being on the way to drive an entire village to extinction is something to be passive about, but when slightly scaring a grand total of 5 of your friends is now reason enough to completely do a complete 180 on everything? What are you talking about? Anyways, Fluttershy is able to talk him into leaving, which just makes me wonder what she could have done with the Ursa minor in the last episode. I will say what she says here is kind of touching.
There. No need to cry. You're not a bad dragon. You just made a bad decision.
Especially if one applies this to their lives. It's telling us that even if we did bad things in the past and made bad decisions in the past, we can continue to grow and change as a person. So that's a good message. So the dragon flies away, never to be seen again. So, what's gonna happen to all that bling in his cave? Did Rarity somehow take it all? Did Spike eat it? Can I have it? So Twilight writes a report to the princess and,
I am happy to report that the dragon has departed our fair country.
Country? Well, I guess now we know that Equestria counts as a country now. I sure do hope that this doesn't get contradicted or made confusing later on.
This adventure has taught me to never lose faith in your friends. They can be an amazing source of strength.
Wow, thank you for showing us what we literally just saw. Anyways, the episode ends with 2 instances of this, which Fluttershy also did earlier, which is a reference to fainting goats. This is so random, but I'm so glad they put this in here. Anyways, interesting how this is the first episode to start using this default font thing in the credits rather than like the fancy medieval looking one that we've grown accustomed to so far. I guess that's another thing we can add to the list of why older episodes feel tonally different, even if this font only lasted for 6 episodes. The main problem I have with this episode, I mean, besides the obvious, is, why the f would Princess Celestia task the main 6 to do this mission? She literally has guards. What is she paying them for? But speaking of the episode itself, I thought Fluttershy's character arc was interesting. The episode starts with her basically having to warn everyone in town that they're about to die, yet she can't because she's too quiet and shy. And one may expect that the episode would end with her finding out how to speak to crowds and stuff like that. It doesn't, and the only thing she really learns is how to stand up for her friends. And honestly, I like this. It's like a subtle way of telling us, the audience, that Fluttershy's journey is far from over, which, like I said about Rainbow Dash wanting to become a Wonderbolt, gives us a reason to be interested and invested in her story, and by extension, coming back to the show. I think Fluttershy's shyness achieves a similar effect. I'm not sure if this was done on purpose or not, but a lesser show would have just solved the entire thing in this one episode and just resort to Aesop amnesia in the very next episode if it's convenient for them. However, the way that this episode did it was a great way to include us in our journey, so to speak. However, that doesn't mean I like Fluttershy now. We'll get to all that in due time. For now, something pretty cool that sets this episode apart from others so far is how we have this page from the concept phase of the show, presumably written by Lauren Faust, that reads, Adventure Stories. Dragon Shy. Fluttershy is much too shy. Even though she has a special affinity with animals and a sweet disposition that everyone loves, she can barely ever speak up for herself. That is why she is surprised why Twilight asks her of all the ponies to help on a new mission from the Queen. A dragon from beyond Equestria's borders has fallen asleep atop a mountain and his snoring is blowing so much smoke into the sky. The Pegasi can't keep it from blocking out the sun. Twilight gathers her friends for the adventure, but Fluttershy is too scared. Once the ponies make it up to the mountain, with much difficulty I might add, they try to reason with the dragon, but it is clear that Twilight's diplomacy, Rarity's charm, and Pinkie Pie's humor will not work on such a disagreeable creature. So the ponies have no choice but to force him off the mountain. But the dragon is too strong for them and Fluttershy watches in horror as her friends are thrown seemingly lifeless down the mountainside. At the sight of her hurt friends, Fluttershy transforms. She marches up to the dragon and gives him the stare. The dragon gulps as she admonishes him. "Who do you think you are?" And "What right do you have?" And "How dare you?" The enormous reptile backs away with every passionate step forward she takes. And to the impressed amazement of her friends, this works. The dragon apologizes and leaves Equestria to find another place to nap. And Fluttershy finds that when you believe in something, even the smallest of us can find the strength to do what is right. Beautifully written. And I'm assuming that this was written pretty freaking early on in development, seeing how Princess Celestia is still referred to as the Queen, and Pinkie's name is spelled with a Y. But it's pretty cool to see that the entire plot of this episode was thought of in such detail this early. Also, this makes mention of the stare, but that won't become a thing till a few episodes later, and not in this one. But other than that, I really wonder how much of the final episode actually matched Goddess Faust's original vision. Really beautiful art too, this is awesome. And despite the fact that in the final product, the dragon is a male named Razor, the reason the concept here looks so feminine is because, similar to the Manticore concept art, to address worry that things would be too scary, I skewed the dragons kind of pretty at first. Might have been an interesting direction. But speaking of background info, this was the first episode for the storyboarder of this episode, Sabrina Alberghetti, or Sibzy, aka Wildfire, aka the person married to Mount a Pony, and holy crap is that a whole can of worms. And she had this to say about it. "I got saddled with so much Fluttershy and CMC in Season 1. I started hating Fluttershy. Blasphemy. Nah, I love ponies. How can you hate Fluttershy? Well, my first episode was Dragonshy, and it's like, holy crap, stop whining." See, she also came away hating Fluttershy, so, I win. Alright then, our second duo episode. Though instead of being about Rainbow Dash and Pinkie, it's about Applejack and Rarity. Let's see what kind of interesting things arise from this pairing. Because the entire collective Pegasus population apparently forgot last week's scheduled rain, you have to compensate by letting down a thunderstorm.
I simply cannot imagine why the Pegasus ponies would schedule a dreadful downpour this evening.
They accidentally skipped a scheduled sprinkle last week, so we need a doozy of a downpour to make up for it is all.
With Rarity finding the rain gross because it ruins her mane and causes mud.
There. Hunker down to your heart's content whilst I finish things.
And Applejack finding Rarity gross because she's too uptight about everything.
Oh, no! I prefer not to get my hooves muddy.
Gah, there is just no pleasing you, is there?
I mean, how muddy could that patch possibly be when rain can't even reach the ground below it? Add to that, how is the grass field around it not muddy?
Y'all wouldn't know useful if it came up and bit you.
Wait, what did you just say?
Bitch.
Because Rarity is a lady of class and will not take being called the B word sitting down, they enter a roasting competition.
Does so, does not. Does so, does not. Does so, infinity.
Does not infinity plus 1.
Make out! Anyways, Twilight calls them in for shelter, with it showing that Applejack apparently has her hat stapled onto her head, judging by how it doesn't fly off while running super fast in extreme wind. How convenient. Speaking of convenient, Spike is conveniently written out of this episode on the account that
Spike is away in Canterlot on royal business.
In what world? Is this perhaps a sign of them not knowing what to do with Spike's character this early on in the show, or is this just sloppy writing? Did they just not decide what Spike's role would be yet? Between being Twilight's son or brother, or just the general assistant who gets assigned to random ponies for a period of time? And judging by this line, where he's presumably assisting somebody else, I wouldn't be too surprised if the last option was the case, but then they realized how weird that would be considering he's still only a baby, and if being an assistant was his job, we'd have to ask how he got this occupation as a baby, and if that's even ethical. We'll come back to this later. I just think what Twilight says here is funny.
Is inside a tree really the best place to be in a lightning storm?
It is if you have a magical lightning rod protecting your home like I do.
It's like they were both put here specifically because people would have pointed out those two things as plot holes if they didn't address it here. Anyways, Twilight reveals that she's always wanted to have a sleepover, and
Slumber 101. All you've ever wanted to know about slumber parties but were afraid to ask.
what the heck? How is she reading the title of the book in the middle of the book and not the cover? Also, what kind of reference is this? Also, what do you mean by this?
My own personal copy
copy.
Your own personal copy? What does that even mean? So like, are the rest of the books not all yours? I mean, this treehouse is a library after all, so presumably not. But then why would you store your personal books undistinguished from the stock? Whatever, my point is that this was an unnecessary line. So they go through sleepover shenanigans, but we must ask, what did Twilight mean by...
You and Applejack should totally sleep over. We'll have a slumber party. I've always wanted one of those.
How far back is always? Like, as a kid? Is that why the first appearance of her involved her shooing her friends away? Or always, as in coming to Ponyville? Learning about friendship and thus also about this activity? I'm not sure. Perhaps the script was written during a phase of not fully having Twilight's backstory all figured out yet? Since this may seem to imply that she was too busy studying or had strict parents preventing her from playing with her friends. Like, as we can see from this early concept art of Twilight, she doesn't seem to be enjoying studying. She seems to be doing this against her will. So this could have been their initial intention.
Ta-da! Ooh. Nah, you just ate them.
Wow, amazing to see that they enjoy marshmallows in this universe when marshmallows are primarily made of gelatin.
Let's see what our next fun thing is, shall we? What does this mean? Pillow fight?
Pillow fight? I don't know how you can simplify it more than that.
Oh, I get it. Pillow fight!
What I'm seeing here is, and I'm sure you've all caught on, is that Twilight, at least in this episode, is really a blank slate character. It seems like the thought process behind this episode was to basically just have a blank vessel be there for Rarity and Applejack to bounce off of. Either that, or they just wanted to make Twilight literally know nothing so that we, as the audience, know as much as she knows and learn as much as she learns throughout the show. If this was the case since the very first episode, that would be one thing. But because this wasn't the case since the very first episode, this is kind of stupid, especially because it's been established that Twilight is a practical individual who is a good problem solver. But in this episode, we get lines like this.
There's a giant tree branch in the middle of my bedroom, and the book doesn't say anything about having a giant tree branch at your slumber party. Or at least I haven't found that entry yet.
Which is a cute, sure, but
there's nothing in here about branches. Well, they do have a section about backyard slumber parties. Is that what we're doing right now? Does this count as camping?
This is not the same Twilight from, I don't know, say, Applebuck season? Once again, we'll come back to this later.
Keep your muddy hooves on your side of the bed.
That sounds so racist out of context. Well, at least Applejack not having her hat on for a chunk of this episode makes her toys accurate. 1/5 of my video has been thoroughly destroyed, I guess. I like how based on this interaction, it's implied that Rarity likes getting splinters in her teeth. Whatever, so Applejack and Rarity make up, yada yada, you've seen the episode.
Is it smaller than a saddle?
Though, what are the implications of saddles existing? In fact, looking at very early concept art of Rarity, we can see that apparently fashion was supposed to involve even more horsewear, opposed to human-esque clothing that they end up wearing. And that was a decision well made. This looks disgusting. Though, once again, according to Sibsy, she said, I don't get the saddles, I think it's just to sell toys. More accessories!
It gives spikes right on her back all the time, but never while she wears the saddles.
I know, unreal. I mean, some ponies wear saddles later on in the show, but still, it doesn't explain the implications of why they look like seats and who's supposed to sit on these. So the lesson Twilight learns is,
Dear Princess Celestia, it's hard to believe that two ponies who seem to have so little in common could ever get along. But I found out that if you embrace each other's differences, you just might be surprised to discover a way to be friends after all.
Which is true, but this could also be interpreted as, if you find someone unlike you, you're gonna bicker and fight until you find a reason to be friends. Wouldn't that just be a reason to only be friends with people similar to you? Like, if you don't want to embrace each other's differences, why go through the hassle when you can just hang around with people who are similar to you? Now, obviously, in a pragmatic sense, it's really boring to hang out with people who are very similar to you, but this episode doesn't really focus on that aspect, and rather just focuses on the challenges that come around from being around people who aren't similar to you. So, yeah. Like, holy guacamole, this is such a nothing episode. I guess it's nice that we're seeing how our main characters play off of each other, but I think we sort of already know that Rarity likes being prim and proper, and Applejack likes getting her hooves dirty and being active. If you put these two together based on that premise, I wonder what kind of conflicts that could possibly arise. Did we really need a whole episode based on this one premise when minor interactions would have had the exact same effect? Wouldn't you rather see these two interact with characters outside of the main six? You basically gave us one-note traits that the main six will be exemplifying in the pilot episode, so the reactions are pretty predictable. Like, the audience aside, isn't it boring for the writers to only write stories involving these six? I don't know, I can see the argument that this is early on in the show, therefore we should be seeing inter-main six dynamics like this regardless if they're predictable or not. And yeah, I guess my main complaint probably only comes from this being a retrospective, meaning this is a look back on Applejack and Rarity after seeing a lot more episodes with them. But I guess in the context of just watching the show blind from the beginning, this ain't bad. Or at least until we get to Twilight.
Truth or dare? I think the truth of the matter is that some pony could stand to pay a little more attention to detail.
And I think the truth is some pony ought to quit with her fussing so the rest of us can get things done.
I don't think this is how the game's supposed to work.
She's not the same pony she was in the show so far. Like, you can make her not know much about friendship without making her brain dead.
Are we getting warmer?
Why? Is it too cold in here for you? I can turn up the heat.
She means, are we getting any closer with our guesses?
Oh! No.
You're telling me Twilight, who has been previously established to have a fairly extensive range of vernacular, has never heard or even used this expression before? Aside from that, once again, this is actually such a nothing episode. I guess Applejack and Rarity going ooh was pretty funny. But the only other cool thing to do with this entire episode is how, according to the writer, Charlotte Fullerton, this episode was originally supposed to be titled Opposites Attack instead of Look Before You Sleep.
The first one was the sleepover episode, Look Before You Sleep, originally titled Opposites Attack. So there's a lot of them when you guys are coming up to me during the weekend, like, oh, you wrote what? I'm like, wait, say the episode? Which one is that? Oh, it changed titles, and characters changed names, too.
Honestly, I think that might have been the better title. At least then it would have been more memorable, since most of this season's episode titles are just making puns out of idioms. This would have stuck out as something different, but oh well.
Puffiness schmuffiness. That's good eating.
And that'll do it for part 1 of this retrospective. Yeah, I can't believe that this is only like the first third of the first season, and we're already well over 2 hours in. I can't even imagine how long this entire series is going to end up being once we do all 9 seasons, plus the Equestria Girl stuff. If there are any missed details that you think I should have included, or any bad observations that I got wrong, or anything like that, feel free to let me know, and I'll make sure to mend them when I'm putting together an extended cut of all the parts for Season 1. Also, definitely let me know if you have any special memories or funny stories associated with any of the episodes that we talked about today. I want this series to be like our look back on the series as a community, and I'd love to include some of your testimonies in the extended cut as well. I also want to give a huge shout out to all my lovely patrons over at Patreon, who actually got to see this video early before it was out on YouTube. Just one of the many perks of being a member of F-Minus's Patreon. Just like these special thanks shoutouts. Thank you Chungisoid, Gio, Nguyen, Nix, Nobody in Particular, Pony 4, T, Uncle Graf, and Verfirmed Mutajo. And thank you all for watching. I shall be seeing y'all very soon for the next part of our journey, or perhaps maybe even in a completely different video. Who knows? It's spooky month. Perhaps I should make a spooky video. We'll see what happens. I'm a mind reader, not a fortune teller, so we'll just have to wait and see. But whatever the case may be, until next time, this has been F- signing out.